seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start.
I got so many questions for you.
Well, first of all, great to meet you. I've been really enjoying our phone conversations.
Yeah.
Thanks for reaching out, and couldn't wait to get here. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. For everybody watching, this is Eric Weinstein.
Perfect.
Not Weinstein. Weinstein.
You've watched your Joe Rogan where he always screws it up. Yeah.
Exactly. So Eric is a mathematic physicist.
I was trained in the differential geometry that is relevant to. I probably wasn't even trained, but I learned to say these words every time. I went to school to learn the geometric basis of physical reality.
Okay.
Sort of
you know what that means?
No.
Well,
Let's go more depth on that.
like our friend Albert Einstein found another guy whose name was Bernhard Riemann, who was a German geometer. And he said, I bet this German geometry stuff that we never really thought about in physical terms is actually the language by which gravity acts. And so rather than Newton's action at a distance where somehow things feel each other across a crowded room,
Right.
Einstein said, no, let's use this geometric stuff, and we'll just say, like, imagine that this table started to warp, and that the way in which objects rolled around on the table was determined by the warping. I bet that's what gravity is really doing. So that turned out to govern one out of the four known forces. Fast forward from 1915 when he did that to around 1975. 60 years later, a guy named Jim Simons, who became the world's greatest hedge fund manager of Renaissance technologies, and another guy named C.N. Yang, a Chinese physicist by birth who did his work and probably is a U.S. citizen, arguably the greatest living theoretical physicist, if it's not a guy named Steven Weinberg. These two guys came up over lunch with the idea that maybe the rest of physics was geometric, except it was a different guy's geometry. It was an Alsatian named Charles Ehresmann. And so now we have this weird thing where the two greatest theories we've ever had are based on two different geometers, and they're two different concepts of geometry. We don't know. Everything is now geometric, but it's two different kinds of geometry.
Okay, with that, we have certain laws of physics that we're bound to, correct? Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light.
That would be Albert, yeah.
Okay. But I feel like when I think about the universe, the vastness of the universe, I think of a couple things. One, because you can say like, well, I know a lot of people, I love Rogan, and I know he tends to lean, and most people lean on this. If there is life out in the universe somewhere, intelligent life, it will be superior to us. I don't think so.
Yeah, you think we're top dog?
Why not?
I like where you're going.
Why not? Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
What, 8 billion years on Earth? Okay. We've been here 200,000 years. Okay, so all the way up until now, we're the first species with this kind of intelligence.
We think,
right? That we know of. But this is all we know. So let's say
we were talking about those orcas before they turned on the microphones, right?
But orcas can't architect their world like we can.
Yeah, they don't have opposable thumbs. If they ever get there, we're in real trouble.
Right, man. So we'd have to wipe them out if that was the case. But all right, so we are an anomaly in terms of life as we know.
So far, yeah.
So far. So why would we assume that life somewhere else would be like the weirdest life form on Earth?
Well, we're not taking responsibility for us. I think this is a fascinating question. There are a million ways to come at it. The most disturbing way of doing this is that we tell two stories in modern times that are the same story, and we don't recognize the implications for telling it twice. In one, there is a creator and a simulation. And in the other story, man is programming computers, and we're worried about artificial general intelligence, that suddenly AI will appear and it'll go rogue. Okay, if you put the two stories together, then you would have the following. God would be the simulator, we would be the thing that's about to become self-aware. And God would be afraid of us saying, I don't know whether this thing that I've created is smarter than I am or more powerful. Now, that thought is so blasphemous that we don't even recognize that it is implicit in the unpacking of the two fairy tales that we're telling ourselves. One, that we're the simulator, and the other is that we're going to create the golem that's going to overcome us.
Right.
So I think, to your point, do you think that somewhere God is checking his code saying, holy crap, I don't know who I just created, and what if these guys come after me?
I don't know. I think about that sometimes, and I think if we have a great architect or engineer, why would we figure it out? I don't think we'd be able to figure it out. Because if I was to engineer artificial life, there's no way you would ever come close to figuring anything out, right? So I guess I don't give us that much credit, or our grand architect that little credit.
Yeah.
You know what? My mind, like sometimes that keeps me up at night. I'm blown away because if creation, let there be light, and then the Big Bang, I'm still like, they're the same to me, And then, okay, so as you know, like with math and science, we can get to the Big Bang, right?
Okay.
But what's before that? And what if the math is wrong? Because if the math is right, I feel like we would figure everything out. Just keep going.
Well, okay, so let's think about it.
Okay.
What if the math tells us there are limits to what we can know? So, for example, Gödel's theorem tells us that even if something is true, it may not be provably true within the system in which you inhabit. So there can be true things that we can't.
I don't want to cut you off being rude. I want to cut you off so I can understand.
Sure.
Okay.
First of all, we're both ethnic in one form or another. So you cut me off as much as you want to.
I just want to understand. That's all. I ask a lot of questions. Because you're widely intelligent, and I'm fascinated by people like you, and I'm playing stuff back over and over and over and over. All right. So why would we believe that there can be answers that we can't answer? Like, why is that okay?
Well, let's imagine that there are things that are sort of true by accident rather than true for a good reason.
Okay, and I believe that's everything, my personal belief.
Like, okay, so, for example, it is true by accident, in some sense, that intelligent mollusks exist, like cuttlefish and octopus.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, imagine that you're in a world where you don't know that exists. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to make a statement about life. And then it turned out you just didn't happen to know about something because you had no reason to know about it. Well, there are mathematical statements that are weirdly true, but not for a good reason. They're just true because they don't happen to be false. Or within the system in which you are operating, you can have something which happens to be true by accident, but isn't true for a really deep and good reason.
Okay, I'm following.
So that would be like a reason that you couldn't prove that something was true because, if I make certain sorts of claims, sometimes something is true for a profound reason, and sometimes it just happens not to be false. Okay. That'd be an example.
You get that, Sean?
I do. And back on the two different paradigms that you were talking about with the creator who's eventually going to realize that we're getting too powerful or self-aware, or us being, that's pretty deep. But I think we even have some biblical references to that being a possibility, like with stories like the Ark. Or, maybe they were communicating it as the sin was too much or they had to start over, but it could have been that.
Right.
That might be the way that's written.
That's in Fermi paradox, right? Once said civilization gets too advanced, the more advanced guys wipe them out, right?
It could be.
Yeah.
That could be an answer why there's so little. It could also just be that we're being kept in a preserve. Right. And that the people who know what's what don't want anyone contacting us the way we don't want people interfering with tribes in the Amazon.
All of that is fine. That's cool. But why? Why?
Well, Mike, let me ask you a question. What animates you and gives you purpose? Where does your life cash out? So,
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
My children and enjoying life. That's it.
You say that's it, but I bet there's more.
It might be.
Yeah.
But I think all roads still lead back to enjoying life. If you really think about it, because I maybe I'm wrong, but I think what separates us from animal kingdom is, of course, self-awareness, empathy, our opposable thumbs.
Yes. Love those things.
Right, but we do things out of novelty.
Yeah.
Novelty is important. Music is important to us. I stare at my dog, and I blast the music. He doesn't even react. He's not even annoyed. Well, I can't see it. I can't tell if he's annoyed or not. It's nothing to him.
Yeah,
that's fascinating to me. Music is so important to me and us, or whatever. They don't even care. They just want to eat and sleep and hump on something.
Yeah, Well, we're pretty similar to that,
right? But we love to enjoy life and be comfortable.
But we don't know why we enjoy music. Nobody really has a clue why something that expensive would be that interesting to the brain. Now, intuitively, I can say, well, if you don't enjoy music, you must be dead in some kind of way inside.
Right.
However, if you ask me to defend it evolutionarily, like why would nature prioritize this quite this much? Nobody has a clue why.
That can be one of those truths that's true by accident, right?
It could be.
There's no big, deep meaning for it. Reason.
Sometimes I go back to, I think that actually the problem is that we have too many reasons that music is important. So one thing is that we were just talking about the power of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And when Jimi Hendrix took Bob Dylan's song All Along the Watchtower, which quotes Isaiah, there's two separate scenes in the Bible. One is Christ on the cross with the Joker and the thief on his two sides, I guess is one allusion. And the other is go and set a watchman and come and let him say what he sees. And he's talking about the writer telling us that Babylon has fallen. Mm-hmm. I think that those chords, it's basically three chords. I don't know what it would be. It would be like A minor, G, and F, just repeating in sequence. Those chords animate the song and they tell us to pay attention. So one thing is, please pay attention. It's a way of sweetening something so that the brain remembers it. Another thing that it does completely differently, if you ever listen, I don't know if Alan Lomax used to go through the deep south of the United States, particularly through the prison system. Mm-hmm. And people would joke that Angola prison in Louisiana was the Juilliard of the South because you had people like James Booker and Leadbelly coming out of there. Mm-hmm. And you would hear music coordinating the work, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that.
So, what is music for? Well, one, is it to get us to pay attention to particular texts that we wanted to keep before we had the ability to print and photocopy. Mm-hmm. Another possibility is to coordinate activities. Another possibility might be to keep out the enemy. That if I know your songs and you know my songs, then at some level I can check to see that you're really one of us. Whereas that guy over there, he doesn't know these songs.
Or
yeah,
we filling up dead space to enjoy our time.
Could be, but I don't think we do it that expensive.
No, but why not?
Well,
okay, back to
because for example, why is it that human females seem to over-prioritize musical ability when they should be focusing on who can get more resources? Like, why can you steal a very high-quality lady away from a rich guy with the ability to play the guitar? We're not quite sure, but it does seem to indicate that the brain is in good working order. Mm-hmm.
Well, Sean and I were talking about, we talk a lot of, every time you and I talk, me and him talk, I talk about our conversations. You're
cheating on me with Sean?
Yeah, I am. I actually cheated on Sean with you. But we have before everything got closed down, first it was just Sean and I, and then another guy joined our group in the mornings. We go train and we hit the sauna, and then we just go there. We just talk, We just unpack things, whatever, and it's really cool. It's therapeutic. But we were talking about are certain things that we do culturally and racially, is there something in that, like in the DNA? And a part of me say no, because I feel like everything is learned. But like, for instance, on the plantations, because we're talking about, well, why are blacks so musical? Well, on the plantations, why wouldn't we? When we're just like the coordinated sounds of the work in that prison, we did the same thing on the plantations.
Oh yeah.
Anywhere, we would just make it fun, you know? So it's just to me, that's out of a necessity to enjoy that time. Like, I gotta do this anyway. Let me enjoy it. I gotta be here anyway. Let me figure out a way to make this fun, you know?
Yeah, although I would say
Also in those songs there were messages, you know, but also some of those messages were, how can I put this? Let's go to white supremacy, right? Before the white supremacy movement, there was still a certain type of white supremacy, and it was a black inferiority, and the tactics were brilliant. It was evil, but it was brilliant. So, and it was, a huge part of it was the Bible, was the way Christianity was taught to us.
right.
It was taught that Jesus was God, because Jesus is not God. He's not God. This is a monotheistic religion.
Yeah.
No one questions that. There's 3 gods now, and Jesus is one of them. And Jesus was white, even though he's Middle Eastern or a dark guy. And he says, don't make images of me. And they made an image of him, of a European. So on the plantation, they also taught us that, you know, you're supposed to honor your master and you go to heaven. So be happy. And we accepted that because we didn't know anything else. Just like I don't judge, people judge North Koreans. They're stupid. They believe this. I'm like, why would? You're born and that's all the information that you have. Over generation after generation, you believe it. Same happened with us on plantations. So some of our songs were like, I'm paraphrasing, like Wade in the Water or whatever. It was like, you know, it sucks now, but, you know, when we die, we'll go to heaven. It's all good. And it's tragic. It's horrible.
But then you have to deal with coded speech, right? So like if you look at Negro spirituals, you see. I mean, do you know Odetta by chance?
Do I know Odetta?
You know her work?
No of her, yeah.
Yeah. So she does a song called "Hold On." I don't know. I can't really sing, but it's like, Paul and Silas are locked in jail, didn't have no one to go their bail. Well, keep your hands on the plow and hold on. And then it's sort of, hold on. What is she really saying? It's like, this is temporary. You know, so in part, the message might be about hold on until you get to the next life. Or it could be hold on because this is untenable and it's not going to be forever. And, you know, or calling Harriet Tubman Moses. Well, how do we know what they're singing about? Are they singing about Moses, or are they singing about some lady who's going to help people get off the plantation into the free north?
Right.
I think that we don't have a clear concept of just how much slaves actually knew, understood, and were engaged in a battle of wits by coding their speech. And you see the same thing, for example, in Denmark during the war. There's a guy named Piet Hein who communicates to fellow Danes through cultural references that can't be understood by the Nazi occupiers. So he comes up with this thing called gruks. And gruks are things that Danes will understand the true meaning of, but he can publish them openly in the Nazi-run paper because nobody understands what the actual means of decoding are.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have like, and then you've got really weird uses of music. So, for example, the crazy story behind Putting on the Ritz. Do you know it?
I don't. Do you?
No. I mean, I know the song.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I know the song.
How does it go?
Dun, dun.
Oh,
I don't know the words.
Yeah, we just know
I just know the
Putting on the
melody.
Ritz.
Just
Have you
putting
seen
on
the
Ritz.
well-to-do up and down Park Avenue? Well, Park Avenue didn't used to be Park Avenue, and it
Okay.
wasn't the Rockefellers. It was the Black Help on Lenox Avenue up in Harlem, and the whites were making fun of them spending too much of their money in lavish display.
Okay.
This is the most offensive song you've ever heard. And then the
okay.
pressure forced it to be changed to to be about whites showing off on Park Avenue,
Right, I got
which
it.
made no sense.
Okay.
Right, and so the issue also, I don't know whether I'm allowed to use the magic, horrible N-word syllables on this program.
You are.
Okay.
We listen. This is a safe space.
Well, it's not a question of
You know,
that. It's a question
yeah.
about using the factual history to talk about bigotry and prejudice.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So Gilbert and Sullivan wrote this play and this musical called The Mikado. And recently, when I was in San Francisco, the Asian theater company in San Francisco said, you can't put on this play because it's yellowface, because it's set in Japan. Now, previously, they had, I think, asked the Gilbert and Sullivan company for the roles of the Japanese. So they were actually not objecting to the play. They were saying, we need those roles. When those roles weren't given, then they said, now we're going to object to the entire play.
Okay.
So they had a town meeting about this. And I said, you guys are absolutely right. This play is bigoted. It is backwards. It is prejudiced. But it's not prejudiced against Asians. It's prejudiced against blacks. So they were completely confused. I said, well, if you go to the original libretto, in the song A More Humane Mikado, which is one of the most famous numbers from this opera, or operetta, it uses the phrase, the nigger serenader and the others of his race. And that they're on a list. And now W.S. Gilbert, the lyricist, was forced to change that to the banjo serenader, where banjo was a reference to an African instrument that came and informed the American folklore tradition. Right? And so by not knowing the history, by not being able to communicate the dreaded syllables and where we were, we don't even know that putting on the wrist has a serious problem. We don't know that the Mikado had a serious problem. The Asians think that it's anti-Asian when it was never about Japan. Japan was a stand-in for the United Kingdom. Right? So it was like a fake made-up Japan that has never existed. And the actual prejudice was against blacks. And that's what really sort of bothered me is that we fictionalized our own history by telling everyone what they can and cannot say. So even when we're running up against bigotry and prejudice, we don't even know where it's coming from. We don't know our story.
Right. Okay, so I want to shift a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you a question. Why, when Kaepernick did the peaceful protest by taking a knee, you know why. I know you know why. Like his reasoning, it was to protest police brutality and killing of African Americans. So it got taken somewhere weird. He's disrespecting the national anthem.
It got taken every way.
Yeah, that is so frustrating to someone like me. It's like I can't even begin to explain to anyone like that's not what it's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. But okay.
Well, the knee was brilliant.
Right.
The sitting down on the bench was not brilliant.
Well, he didn't know.
Yeah. Well, he didn't.
But
it took him a while to find his voice. Yeah.
But let's say he sat down, right?
Okay.
To me, it's like, well, I mean, I'm from New York,
okay,
and what I've noticed, I've lived all over the country. In New York, we learn more history. It's very cultural. I'm from Brooklyn, and the further west I come, people don't know much history. So I'm like, well, I don't think anybody should salute or sing the national anthem. We need a new song.
Yeah,
that's not even talked about. It really is fascinating that it's not talked about, because that's a racist song, right?
Well, it's interesting. If you go to the final, we only sing the first
stanza, right?
But if you go deeper in that song, as you know, it says what? Conquer we must when our cause it is just, and this is our motto, in God do we trust. So it's like, when you need to conquer, you should conquer. Now, is that a message that people know? It's hidden. Right, and and that song, let's talk about that song.
I mean, before that stanza though, it brags about slavery.
Yeah,
and Francis Cress, that was the writer, right?
Francis Scott Key.
Scott Key. I'm sorry,
yeah.
Cress is something completely different, but open racist, pro-slavery. But the song, it literally brags about slavery.
Well, and then the question is, what should you do with a song that comes from, like, it's weird. The Constitution was written at a time when we had slaves. And on the other hand, it's forward thinking enough that you can apply it to women who didn't get the vote until the 19th Amendment and post-slavery, because when it talks about men, weirdly, it was built with headroom, even though it was built in a limited age. And you have the same problem with the Bible, where it talks about slavery and how to be ethical to the slaves that you hold. But the spirit and the letter go in opposite directions. It was progressive for its time, but if you implemented it the letter of the law, you'd be completely regressive.
Correct.
If you think about the national anthem, for example, the first person I think to really understand what you're talking about was arguably Jose Feliciano. And I think it was the World Series, he played a Puerto Rican sort of Latin version, which was super respectful. It was beautiful. It just didn't sound like the usual one. And he got more hate because he touched the sacred thing that you weren't supposed to do in it with any kind of adulteration. Now, of course, that the singing of the national anthem by blacks, in Washington, D.C. is a big issue. Jimi Hendrix saw the Jose Feliciano thing. He said, "Oh, I thought that was beautiful. That guy's a virtuoso guitarist. But if you didn't like that, get a load of this."
Right.
And then he tore that thing to shreds, and he actually brought the violence of that song. Now, one of my problems is one of my favorite renditions of that. Have you ever seen Whitney Houston do it in Sweats?
Yep. Yeah.
And she that land of the free, it's an octave and a half up, and then she punches it one octave. I think she maybe punches it a second octave. So that the problem is that now you've got this thing, and it's infused with all sorts of different meaning.
But is it infused with different meaning, or is it just these wildly talented artists interpret it?
Well, maybe we had to get rid of it. I don't know.
Because I don't even think they know what the whole song. Most don't. And that's okay. It's I get it, because I didn't know about it for a while. Because we only sang one part.
Well, let's talk about the greatest genius of them all, Louis Armstrong.
Okay.
Now, Louis Armstrong, my understanding was in North Dakota, and Louis Armstrong was an orphan in New Orleans, and he had always been terrified of running afoul of white society. And in fact, most whites remember him as a novelty singer. He's this huge, non-threatening friend. Hello, darling, whatever.
Right.
They don't remember him as the genius who single-handedly more or less invented our national classical music, which is jazz in its modern incarnation. So they sent him out as an ambassador, go do your cute stuff, sing the praises of the United States. I think it was 1954. I don't know. Maybe it was Ruby Bridges. And he got word that there were people looking to do violence to a young black girl integrating a school. And he grabbed the local reporter and he said, "Hey, kid, do you want the story of a lifetime?" So Louis Armstrong, I think, brought him back to the hotel in North Dakota and proceeded to sing an obscene version of the national anthem.
Wow, I didn't know this. I didn't know about this.
No.
Well, it's Black History Month, my friends.
Okay.
So that thing moved me too, which is, this is a canvas. And the greatest national musician that this country has produced, who invented our national music, turned it into a giant middle finger to the American South. So now what is it? And that's what I want to bring this back to. It's not Francis Scott Key's song anymore. It belongs to all sorts of bigots and crackers. It belongs to Whitney Houston, Jose Feliciano, Jimi Hendrix. And what we choose to do with it, whether we choose to defang it, whether we choose to spin it, it's like same thing happened with When Johnny Comes Marching Home, right? It's in some sense an Irish anti-war song. Where are the legs with which you run? Hurroo, hurroo. Where are the legs with which you run when first you learned to carry a gun? Indeed, your dancing days are gone. Are done. Johnny, I hardly knew you. His legs are blown off. That's not When Johnny Comes Marching Home in a happy way. But both songs are maintained. Both the heroic war song and the anti-war song are maintained. And so I think what we need to do is to say, well, it's not, whose song is it? right? You know, it's like when Bob Dylan had his song handed back to him by Jimi Hendrix. Bob Dylan's a smart guy. He said, okay, forget what I wrote.
Right.
What that guy did to my song, that's
Right.
the version. And,
Okay.
and he started doing it.
I like that.
And with Colin Kaepernick, I think it's really, it would have been perfect if he hadn't done the intermediate thing of sitting down, because taking the knee is a genius level move, right? There's nothing less threatening in a weird sense than a person who's on his knee, because it says to you, I'm not capable of running after you right immediately.
So what is offensive about sitting? Because I'm gonna tell you this.
Okay, well,
that is a natural instinct for any black person.
All right, well, let's go through it.
Okay.
Because this place is not perfect, and it's not perfect for my family. It's not been perfect for yours. I could tell you how we've been oppressed. I can tell you how the government came after us. My question is, are you invested? Is this your place or it isn't? And my feeling is this is my home. And this country, with its unspeakably negative aspects to its history.
I feel the same way. I mean, no one's running me out of here. Because they say, oh, well, y'all should go. I'm like, no. We've been working here for 400 years. We got stake here.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna, sit and act content until things are fair.
Well, but nobody's asking that. Hopefully.
Right.
Right. I mean, the issue is.
But sitting, to me, is I usually always sit.
Yeah.
Unless it's very awkward.
Yeah.
Then I'll stand, but I won't put my heart on my hand. I'm just being honest. And for those who don't understand why, I mean, you guys kind of see why now. Like, this is not new to us, George Floyd. That's not new. And like I explained to you on the phone, it's not that we're so attached to George Floyd. We don't know him.
Well, actually, you explained something even deeper than that. So I think you should just sort of say more about this, and then let's get into it, because it's just two different views of the same thing.
Right. Because you made a statement about, do people really care about him, right? And I was like, no, I don't think that's it. I'm sure some people know him, of course. It was somewhat of a relief in a weird way that everybody got to see it for us, right?
Yeah.
It's what we've been saying all along. And there's been other instances of this. It just didn't hit this viral. Okay, that's one. And also, I think any human being with a conscience, to see somebody's life get taken by a killer so cavalier with his hands in his pocket, is just even though it's just a subtle movement, his knee is on his neck, it's so brutally violent and evil, It's so callous, But seeing somebody lose their life in that manner, it has the nation, it has the world protesting, and it affects everyone that's seen it for the most part. So that was that particular incident, plus however many more, is why I don't feel it's appropriate for anybody but for me to pledge allegiance to a government that won't fix that. And then here's the thing. Even now, I'm not a political person, but politics is everywhere and it's silly. And on the political side, you have half the people brushing it away. But the looting, but and it's like, nah, let's bring it back. Let's talk about it. If somebody's messing up, and you point it out, they don't want to hear it. But it's necessary. It's necessary to learn, to get better, to grow.
Right.
And we can never. It seems like we never get there. Because when something does happen, it's brushed away. Oh, but you did this, or why did he do this, or so it's never really addressed, the underlying issues.
Yeah, I don't think. Look, the video of this thing scars you for life, and it's exactly what you're saying. Now, I also thought that the cop put his hand in his pocket. I think that maybe that I had that wrong, that he had black gloves and it was the same color as his pants, and so it looked like he had his hand in his pocket. But either way, it doesn't really matter. The optics were, okay, this is like that moment where you show up in an emergency room and you say, I'm having a heart attack. And the person says, I'm sorry, but there were 17 people ahead of you, and you'll just have to wait your turn. Please stop disrupting it. And you're like, no, I think I need to see somebody this minute.
Right.
The person's like, this will be the last time that I, enforce the protocol.
Right.
The cop is not in the right headspace. Somebody is dying under him, and you can't. It's clear to the crowd. So thank God for that crowd, because they're making the point in real time.
Right.
Okay. What is it that we are seeing and what is it that we're feeling is confusing. If you look at the Tony Timpa video from Dallas, it's very similar, because it's cops on top of a human being. His life is expiring. It's around the same. It's 11 plus minutes rather than 8 plus minutes. The guy's white. We don't know what we're watching. We're making inferences. And the issue of George Floyd, I care about George Floyd just from what I know, which is the awesome power of the state and the inability of an individual to even say anything. What Dave Chappelle did, which I didn't think was Dave Chappelle's best work, but the guy's a genius, so you have to listen to everything he does. He makes this point about, like, this guy is having his life snuffed out, and this big, strong man is calling for his mommy. What is that like? And it's humiliating. And I want to talk about black humiliation, because I think that is much more, in part, the story than an individual execution, murder, whatever you want to call this thing. I think that in large measure, you have a problem that you have a long history, which we've never been able to talk about. And when we have a very clean example of it, like, I can get more worked up about the assassination of Fred Hampton, because I know that thing is exactly what I think it is.
Right.
Right? Like, somebody wanted to say to black gangs, hey, cut it out. Let's stop fighting each other. Let's become a viable political movement and use the supposed openness of this society to hear a voice that it had never heard. And what did we do? We assassinated the man in his bed for coming up with the Rainbow Coalition. Okay. Now that I know that, I know what Black America has been up to. When I look at the letter from Sullivan at the FBI to tell Martin Luther King to suicide himself, like, I grew up thinking that suicide was something you did, not something that you caused somebody else to do.
Yeah.
But you want to know one of the most, maybe the most egregious death along racial lines? The person wasn't even black. She was blonde from Iowa, which is Jean Seberg. And for Jean Seberg's involvement with the Black Panthers as a political cause, our federal government planted stories inside of the Los Angeles Times and Newsweek and told a lie that she was having a baby with a Black Panther under her husband's nose. And that caused her to miscarry and hold an open casket funeral for her child and show that the child is white. So our country has a history of insanity and I want to say this very carefully, and I've debated doing that, but on black issues, because it's not a question of people of color or black and brown. I mean, let's say it very clearly. This country is more afraid of blacks than it is of people of color.
Correct.
And we also have a different problem, which is that since the 1965 Immigration Act, the black-white dynamic is being denatured. And in a weird way, that means that Black America is never going to get satisfaction for righting these wrongs, because now there's so much stuff going on. There's so many different racial backgrounds. There's so many different national identities that weirdly we say people of color, both when we mean people of color and when we mean black.
Right.
Because we don't know how to have the coalition. So in all of this, then there's a different question, which is, do you feel invested in the society that screwed you over? And in my case, this society has screwed my family over. The federal government, same thing that was screwing with these people, screwed with my family for our politics. Do I feel invested in this place? Abso-effing-lutely. We've paid our dues. This is my home. And I will stand and I will salute the flag, even though I've had it waved in my face by gun-toting rednecks, and it has all sorts of connotations. There is so much wrong with this place, starting with the fact that we aren't the original inhabitants. Neither your group nor mine.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah, no, 100%.
So living with injustice and living with like our own humiliations. I can talk to you about Jewish humiliation, the fact that we were pressed into sexual slavery to amuse German officers during the Holocaust, through Joy Division or whatever. It's humiliating.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar, and I have the deepest of empathy for what happened during the Holocaust and just other atrocities across the world with other people.
Amen.
I stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone that's being oppressed or being bullied, for that matter. I've always been like that. I've stood up on social media for people who I don't know.
Yep.
Against someone that I know.
Yeah.
Big name, because I feel like, why are you bullying this guy?
Well, sometimes I'll stand up for somebody who I don't like.
Yeah.
To somebody who I do like because they're bullying.
And it's not right.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
It's tough.
So so I'm all the way on board with anyone. I'm all the way on board with what's right against what's wrong, right? So, okay.
But I want to get back to the George Floyd stuff and how I'm very conflicted about this. I do think that we have to understand that what has gone wrong with criminal justice and race in the U.S. is a very important and complicated subject. I am much more, I think, upset at sentencing and selective prosecution, though, than I even am about policing. Because as bad as the policing videos are going to be, and there are going to be more. This is not going to end with George Floyd.
Correct.
People, right?
It's the whole system. It's a lot. It's so that's
the violence of the system. Of, for example, like I have a really good friend, somebody who babysat my children. That's how much I love this guy and trust him. Right now, he's in federal prison for weed, and he's white. He's Jewish. Okay, now I know that it's unusual to have a white Jewish friend in jail for weed. Right? How many black families are torn apart and people have a stain on their resume for the rest of their life for a nonviolent crime that is prosecuted and seen through to sentencing based in part on racial characteristics? It's not small.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So my feeling about this is you can't ask the street for the most considered, statistically aware, historically informed understanding of where we are. People were pissed, but people are pissed about everything and for good reason. And in part, I really didn't like the idea that we glommed onto this. First of all, because I don't know what the racial content of this incident is. We have people being executed on video who are white, and if you did a deep fake and you changed the skin color, you wouldn't know which one was being done for racial reasons or not.
Here's the thing with that. I didn't see the guy in Dallas. I saw the guy in Mesa, the exterminator.
In Arizona.
Yeah, I saw that one, and I was hot. I was pissed, right?
I wanted to do something bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Lynching, right? And even slavery. There was white slaves, but it was 90%, 95% black. Lynching, there was
if you did white slavery, and if you included the weirdness of like how we treated coal mining families where we owned their house, we didn't pay them in dollars, we paid them in script. We hired private armies to enforce that. Like if you count that as slavery,
we're looked at as white people represents God, because we have pictures of Jesus when we were able to have little churches.
Yeah,
white Jesus everywhere. He looks like the slave master. You ugly black, y'all niggas, y'all make me sick. We hated each other because we looking at ourselves and we was in the worst conditions ever. It sucked to be us, right? Our cousins that were half fathers of slaves, slave owners, they got treated a little bit better. They was in the house, you know what I'm saying? We hated them. They hated us. They looked at us like, y'all dirty, y'all uneducated, y'all, So I grew up, listen, I'm from New York, but my mother, she's from Florida. She's from the deep south, Sanford, where Trayvon Martin got killed.
Okay.
I don't like that side of the family. I just hate it out there. They used to, I have family members. They be like, y'all black, ugly, get your asses. Da, 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 da. Everybody, all my cousins, I got whooped too when I was down there. It was like slavery whippings. You know what I'm saying? Extension cords, like shit you would go to jail for. You know what I'm saying? But it was normal. So you walk by somebody's window, you hear the most horrific screaming. It was so normal. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. So that was a reality that we had because our parents hated us. Our aunts hated us because we looked like them. And this is what people don't realize. We so close to slavery. Like the time period is not that vast. So the traditions are so the same, especially in the South, specifically in the South, right? So the residual effects, that education was never important to us because after slavery, you're sharecroppers. You're still not allowed to go to school. Still not allowed to learn. And then when we were, 100 years ago? Like not even that long ago, 150 years ago. So we don't have great-grandparents we don't have a legacy of Harvard or Spelman, anything. You know what I'm saying? So when I went to college, my parents didn't know how to help me with the paperwork.
Yeah,
I had to rough through it myself.
This,
so it's so many things. Nobody, like our parents would use our credit when we babies.
Yeah.
We don't know because they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So, the residual effects, it compounds. And then the game is literally designed for us to lose with the criminal justice system. Literally.
Yeah.
I could give you very specific things that I went through that I figured my way out of, but that could be another episode. But so many traps,
That's true. But I want in on this one because I somehow spilled out someplace totally different.
Okay.
So in my recent, so I was hanging. Let me just say this. I've always been a little bit astounded that I have a relatively small number of black friends, and I've never quite gotten that because my attraction to the culture is pretty high. What black friends I do are so effing accomplished at some psychotic level that my view of the community is so much more positive than the community's view of the community. And this is not the only instance of this. Like when I go over to the UK.
I know why.
Why?
Because you're an accomplished person yourself. You're an intellectual. Your circle of associates are going to be on a higher level. Black, white, Mexican, it don't matter, right? It doesn't matter because there's a lot of low-level whites too.
That's true.
And
but first of all, mostly I don't meet low-level people no matter where I go because honestly, most of us are living nowhere near our potential.
Correct.
And we don't recognize what is valuable about ourselves. So the idea that the Greeks will reference themselves to their super Greek ancestors that they can never rival, right? The UK sees itself losing its empire in a once great power that is, now just a playground for Arab oil money or something like this.
Right.
And, I look at them and I say, do you not understand what Oxford and Cambridge are, what you created? Do you think about the following, this, that, and the other. I have the same feeling about Black America, which is, honestly, this is the intellectual powerhouse that no one expected. That so much of our national character was authored by people who were imported for labor and turned out to be the minds that were the most important. And so the greatest violence, and it's not the psychotically sick physical things we did to blacks, and they're unspeakable. And I've started talking to people, like the idea of cutting somebody's testicles off, feeding them in their mouth, taking pictures and sending souvenirs. Like barbarism beyond what whites understand.
Correct.
We did, right? I say we, and I feel no connection to this, but okay. The great violence was the erasure of culture, of connection, of saying, okay, you exist only as you're in the moment, you're here to do the work that we tell you to do, you're owned and erased.
We spoke about this actually at length on a podcast episode, and it really, being a little bit younger, I'm 32 yesterday, but speaking about the school system, not only did they erase it at the time, where you talk about cutting the tongues out of the first round of slaves and then forbidding speaking and spreading of the culture, because then, like you said, 50 years later, this is history. Your history is that you're here to be a slave. So they erased that. But then even now, there's less obvious, but just as diabolical placements of this type of cultural erasure in the youth, including in me. When we were growing up in elementary school, we were taught that, let's just start with Egyptian people, that they were tan white folk. Mm-hmm. That's what we were taught. Like it wasn't said out loud that this is what it is, but that's how they were positioned, was like just a little bit more tan. They weren't positioned as incredible African culture. That's a subtle example of what happened systematically, and I believe the entire U.S. education system being a product of it. Like especially, I lived in a lot of areas. We moved quite frequently, but a lot of it was in the South, in Virginia and in Georgia. And some of these like Confederate generals are really like, without you even understanding how or why, they're positioned as heroes. People who are fighting for a lifestyle that no one really agrees with now, but they were able to be woven into the fabric of the textbooks.
Not to cut you off, Sean, but just so they understand, they were generals of the Confederacy, which is an enemy to the United States or to the Union. Their plight was to maintain slavery in a white nation. They tried to defect. United States, we won. They lost. But they wrote their own history afterwards. So what you saw in your textbooks was a product of a group of women called
the Daughters of the
Confederate. Yeah. And a huge campaign on just rewriting textbooks, getting monuments, the Confederate monuments erected, and the whole nine. And that's how they try to, get the slavery thing out of the narrative, Wasn't about slavery. That was a small issue.
Yeah, but then there are also all sorts of ways that you celebrate slavery by talking about the beauty and the grandeur of the antebellum past, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And so there are all sorts of ways in which you never really fully gave up the Civil War. It's still going on, skirmish by skirmish. Right. And I think that is increasingly, as somebody who's always believed that the Civil War in some sense didn't end crisply, I do think that a lot of that battle is being won because I don't like the idea that it will go on forever. I often make the point that we Jews could go after Italy, which erected an entire arch to Titus for sacking of Jerusalem and stealing all the good stuff. Okay. And you have to know when to stop, and on the other hand, you have to know how to keep the energy. Like I don't believe in forgetting. I don't think we should ever forget.
Right.
The issue, though.
But okay, what would satisfy you though? All right, we got to stop at some point. But what would satisfy you?
This is what I'm going to get back to, which is that one of the reasons that I'm not a huge fan of being overly courteous to Black Americans when they're wrong is that I view Black Americans as being, in some sense, the great intellectual rival of the Jews. Now, people think that that's very weird. And I don't know why they think it's weird. And I went into this on the episode of The Portal, which is my program with Stefan Alexander. I talk about sort of inadvertently discovering Black culture by understanding that the white music that I was listening to that was rock and roll, the people who wrote the songs that I really cared about were these different set of names. I couldn't find out who was McKinley Morganfield. And, that turned out to be Muddy Waters. And when I swam upstream and said, holy cow, there's an entire musical genre here that nobody ever told me about that I like much better than rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of a really deep relationship with this culture, which is not all positive, nor is it all negative. What it does do, though, is that I'm convinced that the invention of Black culture, in particular in the 100 years after the Civil War ended, is one of the most astounding intellectual achievements and the undoing of that erasure. And, I guess what I just find confusing about it is we have self-hating Jews. That's a big part of being Jewish is self-hatred.
Right. Yeah.
But I want to just challenge you. I think that it's not quite so simple as being self-hating. Like, my experience in Black culture is that blacks understand how profound a gift it is to be black and what a huge pain in the ass it is simultaneously. And it's a dialectic because you have to deal with all of the prejudice, all of the self-hatred, the erasure of history. On the other hand, you get to claim achievements that have lots of white kids in the suburbs pretending that they're black because they idolize.
So there's complexity to that, and also a lot of complexity to my position.
Yeah.
So
Let's
we're not all self-hate.
No, of course.
But it's a huge chunk that is. And it was in me at some point without me knowing, and I had to check myself. And
How did you discover it?
Just recognizing every time I hated on somebody black doing something cool.
Yeah.
Like, why did I say that? Like, why did I, you know?
It was an automatic.
Actually, it happened when, like, my barber, like, years ago, he's black, and he hated on me.
Yeah.
Without him realizing it to somebody else, and I just happened to hear it. I was like, why would he say that? He didn't have to say anything. It was nothing that was helping him, but it's so deeply embedded. So me seeing that is like, I just learned the lesson real quick. But, you know, when you really analyze it, you know what it is. So, and learning history, you see, we get it legitimately. And I'm the first to tell you, if we're wrong, we're wrong. I want you to be hard. I appreciate you. I appreciate that. I tell my circle all the time, please tell me if I'm fucking up, because I may not see it.
Well, it's cheaper to hear it from your friends than it is from your enemies. I'll tell you that.
Right. And if you care about me, you'll tell me if I'm fucking up. So, yeah, it's not that we all see it like that, but and to your point that, you know, we can celebrate, you know, some of our achievements. We don't all see it like that because most of us see your the people that you know are a minority within the minority, right?
Somewhat, but like if I'm talking about you know, the genius of let's say Richard Pryor, there's no way to argue with the guy is a complete comic genius.
Correct.
If I talk about Nicki Minaj, and I'm not so hot on some of what Nicki Minaj is doing, which is in some sense very black, then I'm discriminating in some sense, saying, well, these parts of the tradition.
According to who, though?
Well,
I don't think so.
Well, I'm saying I'm using a discriminating, like the word discriminating. He's very discriminating is a positive, whereas you're discriminating against this. No, I promise. Right. So
context.
It is definitely context. What I would say though is that, you know, at some point recently, I met Stanley Jordan at a friend's birthday party by chance, and I always wanted to meet like an alien from an alien intelligence from the universe. And Stanley Jordan is pretty close to being an alien intelligence from the universe. That guy was working out chemical orbitals and what they could inform us about chord structure. You know, the guy came from Princeton, studied with Milton Babbitt. I look at that guy and I'm thinking, like, if I have to compete with Stanley Jordan, I don't want to give that guy a handicap. I don't want to take a handicap. Like I need to be in tip-top shape if I'm going to outthink that guy.
Right.
And I guess that's sort of my weird feeling about, you know, all of these things. Like, you know, somebody's going to tell me about race and IQ. And I'm going to say, okay, what was Jimi Hendrix's IQ? Because I know much more about Jimi Hendrix's intelligence than I do about the validity of an IQ test. Right. And so if your scores, if your thing doesn't see that, I'm pretty much more confident of my ability to identify genius than I am about your identity to interpret a multiple choice question. And
the IQ test is very limited in what it's judging and what it's testing. I sent you the blogs about the 9 types of intelligence. I'm not sure if you got to check it out, but when we just dive into research on a bunch of stuff, whatever we're interested in at the time, and a lot of the types of intelligence personally that I feel are more important, you won't find that in any kind of IQ testing.
I keep emphasizing whenever you have multiple choice questions,
it's already.
I can tell you that you're not talking about the kind of intelligence that I want because
correct.
You know. Well, you know, let's go back to Jimi Hendrix for 1 second. One of the reasons that it's not very helpful to read music when you're trying to reproduce what he did is that the amount of information that the page contains, about the sound that he's getting, is like a tenth of what makes it interesting. So you can play the same notes as Jimi Hendrix, and no one will care. It's all of the things he was thinking about, sculpting the notes and what they mean and how they connect and how to get rhythm and lead going at the same time. That kind of stuff will never be found in A, B, C, or D, or none of the above.
100%.
Yeah.
Listen, my navigation through the industry that I'm in, I don't know any of the rules, and I don't want to know them, right? And my partner will tell you, when it comes to us, just marketing products and stuff like that, don't worry, I'll come up with something. And it's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, we have an agency that we deal with.
Yeah.
I don't care for them that much because I just, in my mind, a marketing agency only care if you're spending millions of dollars with them. You know what I mean? So, but I'm like, they're looking at the stuff that we're coming up with, like, how did that work? Because it's just an energy of like getting like wherever I'm at, whatever I choose to do.
Right.
I'm pretty confident that I could do a good job at it.
Yeah.
So in this space, I know I can do a good job. I'm very confident at it. So let me just deal with these people and connect. Let me get what I need, right?
Well, breaking rules and breaking frames.
I don't want to know the rules, right? My whole life, I just come up with my own stuff. Most of my life was like underground. Like I didn't exist. I wasn't even on it, but when I got to a point to where like, all right, I got to be a normal citizen. I still don't, the rules is just, I got this. So, all right, some of us recognize what you're talking about and a lot of that brilliance and that wattage, that brain wattage that we have and creativity and things of that nature. Yeah. But you got to think about this. Most people, they don't even have time to think about that because they're working.
I don't actually believe this, Mike.
I do.
Because I think they're doing it all the time. I think
they might appreciate the novelty of things, but they're like, people will look at me. Yeah, but you can tell us that, but you got this and you got that, and I've been.
No, that's the jealousy thing.
But I feel them too.
Yeah, me too.
Because life is hard.
Okay.
I was talking to somebody the other day. I don't know who it was about death, right? And when I was about Uncle T, when did Sule die? 2000, 2001? A friend of ours, we met at a funeral. It's weird.
Okay.
But a friend of ours, a mutual friend, he passed away. And I remember at the time I was young and just had a bunch of problems. And I enjoyed life, but it still sucked. It wasn't fun. And this guy, me and him had a lot of the same issues. And I remember when he died, I was like, dang, man, I know that's a relief. Like, I was like, he's good. He ain't got to deal with this bullshit no more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the existence of a lot of black people, a lot. Because life is hard, is extra hard. I know everybody has their struggles.
Right.
But I don't know everybody's struggles.
Well, the other thing is that when you're black, you never know. You had a negative interaction. And nobody tells you, okay, well, that one was racially motivated.
Right.
Two of those interactions ago, that thing that you thought was racially motivated, that wasn't.
We know which ones.
No, you don't.
We have a thing. We have a term called nigger rules.
Okay.
Like, that was a nigger rule right there. Where's your manual at? Where's that at? Because there's things that come up on the spot, like we could tell. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not saying that there aren't situations where you're all but positive.
Right.
But there's a lot of ambiguous stuff where you can't really get at it.
But I know, and I'm not one of those people.
For example, when I started working for this guy Peter Thiel, who's a billionaire, the world was 30% nicer to me. Now I couldn't tell you which part of that was because people were aware of how much money was behind me.
Right.
But I know that there was a 30% difference in every single interaction. And I guarantee you that if I showed up in a new city with a higher melanin content of my skin, I would have, some percentage weirder interactions than what I was used to.
And I can attest to when my socioeconomic status would elevate, things were easier for me. Yeah, I know it. There's a lot of things that I can navigate around because of money,
right?
And status and things of that nature, And forget black. Most people won't get to that level. Period. Well, right. But when you black and you're not there, it's a little bit harder.
No, I understand.
A little bit harder.
But in part, one of the things that I want to do is create this much more positive. I don't understand this, I guess I'm so in awe of black achievement, and I know about enough of it that I don't understand why the rest of us aren't excited about integration issues for greed purposes. Like, I want blacks in physics not because I want to see my society reflected in theoretical physics. I think we're stuck, and I think we need different intelligence, which is more generative, more flow-oriented, more creative. And quite honestly, I have better conversations in a world in music when I've got top quality players who are all, genius level creative. And I can tell you that there's no way in which the black gift, if you will, doesn't dominate that conversation. It doesn't dominate it in terms of all God's children got rhythm. It dominates it because, like, oh, I used an A suspended 13th because you just used this chord over here, and I chose that inversion in order to open up this line. Like, people are thinking at some level that's just beyond.
Yeah, I a good friend of mine, he's in there, Mir. We've been on each other for probably about 20 years, and we were roommates back in the day, and he's a musician, and I watched him teach himself to play bass guitar well.
Yeah.
And he taught himself keyboard, everything.
Right.
And I'm talking about top level production that he sells to the biggest artists. And I watched him teach himself videography,
right,
graphic design, and he's exceptional at it all. He's just a wildly, now me and him are getting into the stock market, and I'm learning from him because his brain it works so good with things that he's interested in. So, and I just follow his lead. I'm like, all right, let's go.
Why aren't we dealing with the actual legacy of black intellectual? I don't mean black general achievement.
I think
black
I know why.
Intellectual.
I think I know why.
Go ahead.
All right, so we need help in this country.
Okay.
We are exalted by each other within the community, right? We're not exalted on a national level by the government, by big organizations, things of that nature. And if we are, it's for their agenda, their message. Does that make sense? There's nobody looking out for, all right, let's say Jay-Z, right? Jay-Z, I'm so amazed by him.
Yeah.
From what he came from to where he's at. But mainstream would never embrace him. Let's say Floyd Mayweather.
Sure.
This man, all right, while he was boxing for the past 5-6 years of his last 6 years of boxing, he was the highest paid athlete in the world over soccer, everything. And the only athlete to have no endorsements. Nobody else did that. He beat everybody from his sport in which he gets booed at every fight, right? Because they were paying to watch him lose.
Yeah.
White people, there's more white people here, and they didn't like him because he's black and he talks a lot of shit and he's not humble. A tactic that he learned from Muhammad Ali, So,
well, how do you think white people feel about Muhammad Ali?
They hated him back in the day.
They did.
100%. More than Floyd because he didn't go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Right?
And then?
Well, when he was old and the Parkinson's set in, he's lovable.
We had mixed feelings, my friend.
Yeah, but blacks are not accepted until they aren't perceived as powerful or potentially dangerous or things of that nature. Muhammad Ali's a perfect example.
Say more.
He did so much good for this country.
Yeah.
He won a gold medal for this country.
Yeah.
During the Iran-Contra situation, they had American hostages that they were not letting go. Yeah. He went and got them, right? They gave him to Muhammad Ali. You know what I mean? That's not part of his legacy, according to the media. So we gotta people like me gotta tell people that, talk about it in videos or whatever.
So
some of the
you've alluded to perhaps a different type of intelligence that black people possess, a different perspective or way of looking at it or way of thinking. Would you guys think that it's fair to say that the same way as we kind of potentially created God in our image, not vice versa, that the American institution or how you can build success, starting with the education system and then thereafter, is modeled for the way white people think. And it's tough to grow and thrive in that without some kind of like exceptional talent level. Like if you were a black man coming up, that the game's not designed for you.
Somewhat, but I also think that which game isn't designed for whom? Like this is kind of the cool thing. I have a favorite example, and I use it a lot, but it's worth it, which is Minton's Playhouse in Harlem, where that was where bebop really took off. Open mic night at Minton's Playhouse. And the key thing about it was blacks were very focused on anybody who was good enough to take the stage was welcome. Because the open mic is the proof.
Yeah.
No, but it's also the giant FU to white America. It's like you need the admissions to Juilliard to be a carefully guarded secret as to how it works. We just have an open mic. If you're good enough, we know it. If you're not good enough, you're going to have to leave, and it's going to be quick. Right. So this is a very black attitude.
Kind of like the Apollo.
Yeah. Well,
You get booed out of there.
oh, believe me. And that stance at Minton started to explore an idea like maybe we're smarter than whites. And I think that, that's kind of obnoxious, but it's also kind of interesting. Maybe whites can't think as fast as we can. Maybe they can't do all of the transformations in their minds needed to take something that was in, waltz time and move it into, some crazy time signature, some key that you'd never play in. We can think that fast. You can't. So let's explore our differences. Now, I think that there's another really interesting thing that I like to talk about, which is this photo, which is famous, called, I think, One Day in Harlem, which shows all of the jazz cats who were dominant photographed on the stoop in Harlem one day. Everyone remembers the photo as if it's black, and it isn't. There's Latinos, there's whites, everybody's in that photo. But because it's One Day in Harlem, and because we're so expecting to see black faces dominating jazz, we don't realize how open that culture was to merit, right? And so my first issue is I can't begin these conversations unless somebody has my understanding of how profound the black analytic tradition. Let's go back to Muhammad Ali. A lot of what Muhammad Ali did was intellectual. It was 100%. A question of understanding the mental game in fighting. He changed up the issue of being a much more athletic rather than just a high mass individual. I guess what he did to destabilize Sonny Liston mentally, the rope-a-dope strategy that he came up with to get the ropes to absorb.
You ever see this one picture? I've posted it over the years on my Instagram over and over, but it's a picture of him with a newspaper. Angelo Dundee is like right behind him, and it says mental warfare.
Yeah.
People they just see a cool picture with him and Angelo.
Yeah.
I'm like, he knows what's up.
Well,
But when you listen to him now, like his videos, because there's no internet back then, he'd be in the UK giving all the secrets, because it didn't spread back then.
And he was also proud of it because he was outthinking his opponent.
Exactly.
And I think that in some sense, we treat as non-intellectual lots of things that in fact were mental innovations. And you and I were talking about Emmanuel Augustus. Just in terms of raw creativity. Talk about a guy who threw the entire rule book out in boxing. Are you telling me that what made him Mayweather's arguably greatest opponent was his punching, or was it his thinking? It was his mind.
His mind, exactly. Yeah. And the reason why he didn't beat Mayweather is because he tried too hard to beat Mayweather.
Well, that's it. So, we should. I would love to go into the story about why he didn't become more dominant. But in terms of whose demonstrated intellectual contributions are going to be retained.
Correct.
I think it's incredibly important that we cite these things. And of course, I've given music, science, and comedy as the three things that I tend to use as indicative of the level of a mind.
What about athletics?
I'm divided about that. Now, it could be that I've just never been wildly athletic. I certainly know that when I see somebody like, I guess Michael Jordan would have been a famous example, that so many of the innovations that are coming there have to do with doing things that nobody's ever done.
Right, because, I feel like athletics is just up there with everything because it's our minds making our bodies do whatever our body's doing, right? Our body's not just doing it on its own. So
it depends for me on the innovation. Like if somebody is just, like if you ask me about Mike Tyson, one thing I get when I'm looking at Mike Tyson is just simply the raw power of that hand. The other things, though, have to do with all of the strategy of Mike Tyson. So if I pull those two things apart, the power of the right hand is an awesome and frightening and humbling thing to look at. But
he's a wildly intelligent person.
Yeah.
Back then, when I was a kid, because me and him we're cool now. But before I knew him, I'm watching his tape. I remember this stuff as a kid. He says, I don't necessarily hit harder than anybody else, but I'm punching from down, going up. And my legs is giving me more power. It's giving me leverage because he's a small heavyweight.
Yeah.
So, and you think about it. If you ever watch like UFC, ground and pound, they're punching guys like 20 times. Yeah. The referee has to stop it. No one's knocked out like that.
Right.
Punching up, you hurt people. You got all of this leverage. So Mike knew was perceived as an
Probably
impediment.
knew human physiology like nobody's business.
Correct.
Yeah.
He knew that, and he knew that from studying boxers of the past. His idol in boxing was Jack Dempsey.
Is that right?
Who was a wildly violent puncher.
Yeah.
Every punch was meaningful.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you so angry? So Mike Tyson had to fight with that kind of strategy, that sense of urgency, because he's a small heavyweight. And reality is, those guys,
Well, but I'm trying to agree with you. I'm trying to say is that if I take Mike Tyson and I break him up into two components,
right?
One is the unrivaled, awesome power of the punch,
correct,
and the other is the mind that figured out how to use that weapon so devastatingly effectively, particularly in early rounds.
Right.
I am absolutely of the opinion that second thing is a form of intellectual achievement.
And I'll tell you that was a more dominant factor in his success and his legacy was his
well, in boxing, sometimes we cover up the fact that it's a slugfest, and sometimes we emphasize that in fact you don't win by winning slugfest, you win by outthinking.
100%. And if it was a pure slugfest, all fights would end in the first round.
I know. Yeah,
it's hard to land a clean punch in boxing.
Well, and that's I was going to ask you about UFC, which is this innovation. I think it's one of the honestly the ground and pound stuff. I don't like the last little bit, which is I like all the chess stuff before it gets down to just beating the crap out of your opponent.
Right. I don't. I'm not a fan of that part.
It's part of it.
If I was in the UFC or did MMA, if I knocked the guy down, because I think it's noble and it's just more badass, I'll back him and let him get up.
Well, I've seen that.
I don't want to attack him. Okay, I gotta hurry up and That's fear.
Well, but it's whatever the rules of the game are.
Yeah,
I get
that, but I would have to disrupt. For me,
well, that would be cool.
I think that would.
But that's also
more
let's
impactful.
Be honest about it. It's a little bit of a peacock's tail
in
terms of saying I can afford to let you get out because you're going back down.
100%. And here's the thing, that's ego.
Yeah.
And I have a healthy ego.
Yeah.
I know how to tuck it away, but I know how to bring it back when I need it.
Okay.
And I will 100% use it right in that situation because in combat it's a show, it's entertainment. So the most entertaining thing would be, I'm going to let the guy get up.
Well, that's the thing. I love watching the most eccentric guys. Like, Anderson Silva was some kind of a poet.
Right.
Tony Ferguson is miswired. Like, you hurt him and he gets stronger.
Yeah.
Like, there's all this weird psychological stuff that I find fascinating.
I love UFC. I love boxing. I love martial arts and combat sports in general. It's a nobility to it. People don't really see it. You have to have been in it to understand what I'm talking about. I'm sure some people can appreciate what I'm saying. But one thing that I don't like about what mixed martial arts have become.
Yeah.
It's become, generally speaking, no more specialists, just guys that kind of do stand up and ground. You know, I liked when there was a sumo wrestler going against a karate guy.
Well, I was excited because we didn't know what worked.
Right.
And for example, I mean, maybe the Gracies had a little bit more knowledge than the rest of us from the Gracie Challenge, but I don't know that we would have guessed. I guess what the four dominant pure forms would be: wrestling, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and boxing. And like, we didn't know that, you know, some form of Aikido or Kung Fu.
So what if a guy, how exciting would it be for a guy who's a master jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
then a guy that's a master Muay Thai,
Yeah.
and they train for each other
Yeah.
against just that style? I would like to see that. I think that would be awesome. We didn't get to see that because everybody started out just with their particular system of fighting, and then, all right, let's learn a little bit of everything. So that's why guys have such short careers in UFC.
Yeah.
I want to see longer careers. I want to see a specialist. I appreciate, like in boxing,
Yeah.
Timothy Bradley fought Manny Pacquiao and he beat him the first time. Second time, Pacquiao won.
Yeah.
The third time, Bradley, he had everything to beat Pacquiao.
Yeah.
But he tried to just knock him out. I'm like, bro, you cannot disrespect a legend like that. Y'all on too high of a level. That's not going to happen. You're not going to catch him with a lucky shot. That's what I love about the mastery of you being a master at your specific system. It's not going to be an easy shot, a lucky shot. You see that a lot in UFC, like, oh, he just got caught. Like, this guy was on top of the world. He just got...
Well, that Ben Askren thing that was over in like 4 milliseconds.
That's...
That was pretty wild, though.
And then you have, like, Dana White,
Yeah.
good businessman, I guess, but is not good for his sport or his athletes. I know a lot of these guys,
Yeah.
high level, and they're not generally happy with him. And if you just watch it from the outside, one guy or no name can do well against somebody, and all of a sudden they're ready for a title. You know, it's just too fast. It's too, you know, these guys are not developing a career. Boxing, it take a little longer.
Yeah.
But then these guys are locked in and they make tons of money because they have 10 years of building up equity with fans.
Yeah.
In UFC, these guys come and go fast.
All right, but I want to bring the race angle back in and maybe explore
Okay.
something that makes me uncomfortable.
Okay.
One thing that I'm worried about is too many young black men focusing on athletics as their ticket. And I don't mind some who are genuinely gifted, but I worry that I want science's share of that pie.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you.
And
Okay, I'll tell you what
go
can
ahead.
help.
Sure.
Someone like you, I'm fascinated by your brain power. You got a Hemi. That's a Dodge Demon. 1,000 horsepower, right? You know, we don't see that. We're wildly fascinated by it. I'm like, Michael Eric Dyson's I love this guy. I love intelligent people. I'm as fascinated listening to a lecture or podcast of yours, just like me watching LeBron highlights.
Okay.
It's the same to me. It's amazing. And for a lot of us, that's the same, right? So, but we don't have a legacy of education for obvious reasons. Like, we were barely allowed to go to school not that long ago. People don't realize that. But, you know, so we don't have that yet, you know? Neil deGrasse Tyson is wildly popular, you know? Sean and I went to see him like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
When people really didn't know who he was, you know. But people are fascinated by it, but we don't have many representatives of it yet.
Okay.
But we have a lot of LeBrons and Jordans
All
and
right, but
Floyds
like-
but
let's-
even someone like you, like, all right, so science, math, people don't realize how important mathematics is. People don't realize the problems that are solved with math. It's wildly fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So in our communities, it's not that important. It's annoying, you know? It's like, what do I gotta do algebra for? They're not gonna do that at my job. You know what I mean? So it's not, and nobody goes into depth on why math is important, right? In our schools, we're getting recruited by trades, like mechanic trades, trades like blue collar trades, not the sciences. There's no STEM in urban community schools.
All right. Well, then get your listeners to come over to the Portal Podcast and listen to my conversation with the new head of the National Society of Black Physicists, the NSBP, Stefan Alexander, Trinidadian guy who is one of the greatest saxophone players I know well. Played with Ornette Coleman. Is also doing particle theory, quantum gravity, and
that
cosmology.
Man is wildly intelligent.
He's just off the effing charts, and he needs our help. And so,
Okay, so here's the thing. First of all, I'm linking your channel right below. Y'all go check out the Portal, everybody.
But that episode in particular.
Okay, I'll put that one in particular. Now, Sean and I, both of us have been really impacted. Like, this has been heavy on our hearts, all the stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah.
And we're like we're really making an effort to figure out what we're going to do to be of impact. And we're throwing around a lot of ideas, and we haven't landed on one yet. But one thing that is necessary is like in underserved communities, having things in place to give people more options of activities. Just options, period, because it's nothing, and a lot of families are, broken families, single parent households. So, and the mothers are busy working; they don't have time to rear their children the right way, and we can't leave it up to the school because they don't give a shit.
All right.
So, I feel like programs that can get people excited about science. My grandmother took me to the planetarium in New York when I was a kid, and that just. I'm surprised I didn't become a scientist. I study science like it's my job now, but I've been on that odyssey since then. If more people have exposure to it, it's too beautiful to not be fascinated by this and to start understanding what that means.
I've had this idea since I was a folklore minor in college, and I studied a lot of like how does Black society gate. And decide who's worthy of pushing up and who's to be pushed down. And basically, it's open head-to-head competitions over and over again in everything: chess, poetry, music, comedy. What if we had math slams, right? Or you have head cutting competitions. Have a physics cutting competition where you go head-to-head on something that's like some super hard problem. How much progress can you make? And use an intrinsically Black idiom. To do the same thing that we do in basketball, in poetry, in spoken word, in chess.
Right.
So the idea is who's got next.
I like it.
Yeah,
I love it.
And it's just like it's totally meritocratic. It's performative in the sense of everybody gets to peacock and strut their stuff, and if you respect your opponent, then you make up afterwards and you become
100%,
fast friends. Right.
100%.
Right, so basically, let's do the dozens, but with partial differential equations instead.
100%. I'm with it. I love that. I love the whole idea of just opening young people's minds to something that they didn't even know existed. Because I'm gonna tell you, like, you're so far on the spectrum of intelligence. There's probably so much there's probably stuff you're trying to forget that a lot of people don't even know exists. With math and with science.
Well, but I want to do some more of it visually. Like, I think one of the things that really saved me musically was I can't read music. Just can't. And I've tried it for years, and there are learning issues, and it's just not for me.
Right.
How amazing to find an entire community of people that didn't necessarily expect to be able to, when you've got blind people like Ray Charles and Art Tatum,
right.
Huge number of blind guitarists. All of those people were learning through theory and learning through other means of transmission. Okay, so my point here would be, I don't want to pretend that science is intrinsically colonized and needs to be colonized. I do want to talk about your idea that if you don't have this as part of your tradition, if you can't see yourself, it's so much harder for a guy like Stefan, who's the son of an immigrant cab driver, to imagine himself as a professor of theoretical physics at Brown. Because, man, there's nobody around. And to your point about Neil deGrasse Tyson, I went to this dinner in New York that Stefan invited for me, invited me to, and it was James Gates, who's probably the most well-known theoretical physicist who's black, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Stefan, and I was like the other guy, and so I got a chance to like, well, what happens when like physics is black and you're the white guy at the table?
Right.
And people are talking about
That's
neutrinos
crazy.
in a totally different idiom.
Right. Was it different?
Well, it wasn't long enough for me to say whether it would have been
Okay.
different as research, but I can tell you that the cadences and the role of alcohol, like Stefan and I drink like fishes whenever we talk math.
Right.
Yeah, it was more fun, and it was much more like collaborating. Like, I'm not a great musician, but
Right.
these guys are always kind and they let me hang.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was this issue about how do you trade and collaborate with ideas. And first of all, everybody's got to sort of strut their stuff and show, you know, I'm a capable person. But once you've done the table manners of like understanding,
Right.
you know, I think Fats Waller was famously said when Art Tatum walked in, "Ladies and gentlemen, God is in the house." You know, because like
God
as good as
feels-
Fats Waller was, he was no Art Tatum.
Right.
Yeah, it was different, and the issue is also that you can see yourself. You know, I didn't choose Stanley Jordan at random. I could see the analytic intelligence, for example, and the fact that I came to understand that it was basically Princeton and high-level mathematics and music and all this stuff. No surprise to me. But what we need to do is we need to be able to hold up authentic exponents, and also to say, like, we have some problems here. So, for example, with all the chess stuff that I see going on, I think there are 3 grandmasters with African backgrounds. It's too low. I don't know why.
Well,
But
I know what we know. What well, it's just
I don't.
our history. Our history is long, but it's been truncated to 400 years.
Yeah.
So by design, so most black people don't. It's not a thing playing chess, but we kind of popularized chess.
Well, that's the thing, like sort of almost street chess. And the other thing I was going to say
I'm saying
about it.
before that,
Yeah.
the Moors, we took it from
Okay,
India,
so you want to talk about it?
and then we dominate. The Moors conquered Spain and Italy.
I was talking about American blacks, but
Okay, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if we knew the history of chess, we know that we were huge in making it so.
That's true. But
Right.
but let me give you another hypothesis.
Okay.
I don't know if it's right or wrong. Maybe chess is really badly designed, which is that the opening book in chess is this giant monotonous thing that you have to memorize, and it has a lot to do with how good a player you are, or whether you know all of the openings.
Correct.
Bobby Fischer said, "This is a stupid thing. We should randomize the assignment of the pieces on the back ranks. And then we should start with random configurations to make sure that memorization stuff doesn't dominate the game." So there's the Fischer variation of chess is to get rid of the opening book. Now, one argument that I have is that maybe that doesn't appeal to Black America. Like, studying a huge amount of stuff to just repeat is boring.
Well, I don't think so. I don't know. I learned it easy, played all my life. My sons learned it easy. This is something now I know that it exists, and I haven't looked into it. Now, before it was chess, it was called something else. And the Africans and the Indians created it. It's a war strategy game.
Right.
And the Africans spread it all over Europe.
And there are these variations on the
So
yeah.
it changed when Spain kicked the Moors out of Europe, and the Queen Isabella, the young queen, she changed up some shit on the chessboard and made the queen the most powerful piece and made the king super weak. That's why the queen is so powerful. She just do everything.
Yeah.
And the king just, you got to protect him. So it'd be interesting to look at the original form version of chess. I think I'm gonna look into that. I gotta ask you something.
Sure.
We live in a fucking movie. Maybe this is a simulation.
Maybe.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Uh-oh.
Fuck. All right, so when I was watching it, when I first watched the documentary, I didn't know nothing about this guy until, he got arrested, and then seeing the documentary, I'm like, oh shit. But my mind is racing. I'm like, this is not what I see. This is not it, right? Something to this. And then I heard your understanding or theory on it because you had an interaction
One of my
with
episodes,
him. Yeah, and you think he was a construct.
Yep.
And a honeypot.
Well, he was using honeypots
Mm-hmm.
right and left.
So I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But I think he's alive.
You think he's alive?
Maybe.
Well, you and I don't know that, but let's
Yeah,
put
we
it
don't
this
know.
way. I would
don't
not
know.
gamble my children's life on the fact that he's dead.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think he's alive.
You don't think he's alive?
No,
Right.
but I don't think. You know,
Him-
people have a very hard time with like conspiracies because they imagine that there's something called a conspiracy theorist and they're all crazy.
Alex Jones.
Yeah, well, but I don't even know. Very often with the conspiracy theorist, they've got some wins under their belt. Because
He had a couple.
yeah, so he might. But the conspiracies have always existed, and we've uncovered so many of them. It would be bizarre if we thought that they were all in the past.
Right.
And so, what are we really fearing when we're talking about somebody's being a conspiracy? We're fearing that they're going to destabilize the narratives. And you also very quickly are in some sort of cloud of uncertainty. So it's easier to say, I think he's alive, or no, he's dead, but he was an Israeli-Saudi co-project and then they killed him, Those are things that we do to decrease the cognitive load that comes from being able to say, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know what this means.
I have no problem with not knowing, but I can't help but to ponder on it.
Yeah, go
because
ahead.
it just doesn't make, the story as told, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, we all know it. We
Right.
all know that the story as told is like,
Let me inform them on your theory.
yeah.
Correct me if I'm messing anything up.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so you met with him years before he got indicted and before the world knew he was a pedophile, right?
Somewhere between, I can find out the exact date, but somewhere
Okay.
between 2002 and 2004.
Okay, so it's prior to that. So in the financial world, he just didn't add up, right? His story didn't make sense.
Not to me.
He didn't fit the profile of a hedge fund manager, a guy. Okay.
I mean, I knew a few hedge fund managers by that time, and I can tell you that didn't look anything like one of the known types.
Correct. Okay. And the amount of wealth he had versus how he lived seemed kind of weird too.
I would say he projected that he was in 11-figure territory, so tens of billions. Now, there are not that many people with tens
Correct.
of billions,
Correct.
and I think there's only one or two people who've ever gotten to hundreds of billions, and that's
Right.
only recently.
Yeah.
People will hear, well, he was a multimillionaire, but the world is constructed so that people with, let's say, $20 billion aren't fooled by people with $200 million.
Correct. 100%. I get that totally.
Yeah.
Nowhere near those numbers, but my numbers, I know who's not around.
Yeah.
Who's real and who's not. So okay, so he
was not acting like a 9-figure, $600 million
What
guy.
was he acting like?
He was acting like he was a $40 billion guy.
Okay, right. He is an intelligent person, correct?
He was?
Right, or
Is?
was maybe.
We don't know.
So
Jeffrey, if you're out there, come on the portal.
come on, man. So yeah. So potentially, no one's asking the questions if he's connected or ever been connected to any intelligence agency.
Isn't that weird?
Very, very, right? We got to make more noise on that. Okay,
If we want to remain alive, I don't know how much noise we can make.
well, if they take us, y'all know why. We're martyrs to the
Okay.
cause. Okay, so
By the way, Mike Rashid will be my personal security detail if this conversation
I
goes
got you.
forward.
Don't worry, I got you.
All right.
Jessica is my security, so
All right.
we
It's all-
good.
it's all
We
to
good.
Jessica.
All right, so now the relevance of him being connected to an intelligence agency would be for him, So basically, the theory is he's he's hanging around other wealthy, powerful, influential people,
Yeah.
Political people, whatever, and having all the girls around, supplying everyone's vices, right?
Well, I don't think he was supplying everyone's vices.
No, okay.
I think that a lot of people knew him and he wasn't supplying their vices. So I think, I don't know how many of the scientists were having their desires catered to.
Right.
I think
But that was new. That wasn't. He wasn't around long enough to really nurture that, right?
No, I don't think that's right. I think that whatever he was, there was a VIP treatment to the heights of depravity and criminal behavior that he probably didn't expose everybody to, because it's probably too dangerous to expose everyone to that.
Okay, so I got it wrong. So I was thinking maybe what you were saying was maybe he was gathering secrets just to have leverage.
Well, I think he was
potentially.
Probably.
Okay.
But my claim would be that maybe if you're going to do something illegal and immoral, you're going to be very careful about extending that to, let's say, former presidents or members of the British royal family, but you're not going to expose every physicist or biologist you have over to your house, right? And so I think that a lot of people, there were three different sides that I think people saw. One, they saw a financial side. Two, they saw an intimate side that was not highly sexualized, or if it was sexualized, didn't dip into illegality. And then I think that there was a third thing, which was like the illegality that might have compromised people and really trapped them.
Right.
But, you know, I at some point I said that maybe what happened might have been that he was hired to play a Hugh Hefner role, and that he ended up playing Humbert from Lolita as a guy who had a problem with little kids.
Okay. Why? Okay. In your theory, why would they hire him? What's the intent?
Well, I can easily understand an intelligence service using honeypots.
Okay.
I can't easily understand an intelligence service using children as young as 12 or below, not necessarily because I can't imagine that it wouldn't be useful, but because the danger of doing that and having to take responsibility for it would be psychotic for any...
I mean, what kind of... We live in a pretty crazy world. What?
Well, but that pretty crazy world has an incentive structure. So we talked before about Fred Hampton being killed, for example. We found out about that because the America's secret police, which we call the FBI, was called into question during the Church and Pike hearings in the mid-1970s. They don't want to go through that again. Right? Like, you don't want to have your secrets and your sources and methods discussed on Capitol Hill.
Right.
So my feeling about it is that even for selfish interests of wanting power, and assume that you have no morality to you whatsoever, you're the most amoral or even immoral person, I can't easily imagine that you would try to get approval for a program that directly uses children in sex trafficking, because if that blows up on you, no matter what information you've...
You know what? Me being a risk taker, I can relate to the art of risk taking, and I think the stakes are so high and there's so much power on that side that I could see them doing it. Because here's the thing: the way in which we were told Epstein died, no one believes it. But what does it matter? What can anybody do?
We didn't know that, and the story ain't over. So I would say that the two things is whatever Jeff Epstein started as, he started in a world in which the internet and social and mobile were in their infancy, if they were even extant at all.
Correct.
So I don't know that we didn't start a program, or some other government started a program, and then the internet cropped up and endangered that program. And I don't know that it ended up as whatever program it started.
Right.
But I know intelligence services to do some pretty screwed up things. This strikes me as a very hard thing to imagine. It's very hard for me to imagine somebody saying, hey, I got a great idea.
Right.
What if we attract very powerful people and we use 12-year-olds, you know, as the bait and lure to control them?
Right.
And I would think, how does that get pushed through? Who signs off on that?
I can see it.
Really?
I can see it. I mean, it's sick. It is. But it's a lot of sick. I see a lot of sick things. You know, a lot of good people sacrificed and people experimented on, and you know, we can go down the line. I can see it. I don't think they have any limits or any boundaries as to what they would do for their bottom line.
They may not have started that way.
But just the fact that let's say like what is that show called on Netflix? Ozarks, right? Now it's a fiction show, but it's a lot of reality in that, right?
Don't know the show.
Okay, it's a really good show, but there's a part when there's a guy. He's a money guy. He's a hedge fund manager, right? What's his name? The guy, the actor. He's so good.
Jason Bateman.
Bateman. Anyway, he's real smart. He goes down to the Ozarks, and they're a little slower, and they're offended by his intelligence. But he's just cleaning up and just doing all this stuff with money and trying to build a casino, yada yada. Make a long story short, the feds are trying to get him. They're trying really hard to like incriminate him.
Right.
And he's doing things. He's like on that line of doing things illegal, but he's doing stuff for the cartel legally, right? So what happens is these FBI agents, he gets in a relationship with another guy that they profiled and knew that he got picking up a male prostitute years ago.
Okay.
And he's a tough guy, and he wrestles with his sexuality. And he gets in a relationship with him, and he gets him talking and records him admitting to some crime. Yeah. And then he just plays it for him like, this is what I need you to do. Yeah. Right? And that's a true indeed. It's a movie, it's a show, but it's a lot of reality in that. It's so much entrapment, and there's crimes that don't exist, and they're trying to put you, because they want you, they're going to create a crime for you. I don't think there's any limit to what will be done for whatever weird objective they may have.
Well, I don't think we knew just how we stumbled on the craziest thing, and we're pretending that we didn't just see like three aliens get out of a cigar-shaped object in the middle of Brentwood.
Yeah.
It's like, so this Epstein thing, nobody knew. Well, did you just see this complaint about Epstein and Donald Trump
from 2016?
Yeah,
I did.
In the middle of all this madness.
But what's interesting is that complaint was filed in 2016.
Yeah.
Before, I didn't know anything about Epstein back then. They were connected, clearly.
Well, see, here's my uncomfortableness. Since I had this meeting, let's assume it's late. So imagine it's as late as 2004.
Okay.
I've been talking about this guy as a construct because I thought he was obviously a construct for all this time.
And it's so bizarre to you. It stood out.
Well, I've never met anything this weird. And that was before the sexual allegations.
Right.
This was just like the weirdest meeting you could possibly have. And
what was weird about it? Like what was some of the signs or symptoms of it being unusual to you?
Well, first of all, that he appeared to have information about me from some source that I didn't know.
Was it accurate?
I think so. He asked me to his house, and his entire staff seemed to be beautiful women in their 20s, like making a point of it. I was shown into a waiting room, which had a very weird art object. When I inspected the art object, I found what I thought was a lipstick camera inside of the object meant to be looking at me. So, like, not only were there hidden cameras, but I think you were intended to find the hidden cameras.
Right.
So
he wanted you to be uncomfortable.
He led me back to a room, or his people led me back to a room which had an enormous long dinner table with an American flag as the tablecloth, which you would never do because the flag is an object of veneration. So for food to touch the American flag is like it's a test of some kind. And then he had this like heiress that he was bouncing on his knee during the meeting, and she was intended to jiggle and titillate to see whether or not I would be distracted. I guessed. I don't know.
Yeah.
And like the guy, he was. I don't know if he was the world's most handsome man, but there are people who are so physically stunning you can't take your eyes off of them. There was something very unusual about his physical appearance and character. He did look a bit like Ralph Lauren. He appeared to be very smart. He appeared to constantly change the topic so that you could never quite tell what he knew, what he didn't know, where he was going.
And you recognize that as him being deliberate with that?
I didn't know what it was. I knew that it, like, normally people say, look, let me tell you about my business.
Right.
And they won't say anything very specifically, but they'll say, you know, in this business.
Did you ask him any specifics?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he danced around it.
Well, it's normal
I
not
love
to.
people-
It's
I
normal
like-
not to say exactly what you're doing.
Right.
It's not normal to be completely evasive about the type of thing that you're doing. And I don't think he was doing anything.
Right. That would strike me as weird.
And then he had like this whole office at Villard House on Madison Avenue in Manhattan. And I dropped off materials there. Why have I never seen any analysis of the records taken out of Villard House? Or who has the papers for the supposed hedge fund? I mean, are there SEC filings? Was he registered with the SEC?
And he wasn't?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Just like why aren't we asking?
Can you dig into that? Is that?
Am I going to?
Oh, no.
Somebody else should dig into it.
Okay.
I think I got enough risk on this one all by myself.
We're not saying do it, but do it. Okay.
Well, that's the thing. There's no reporting on this.
Right. That's
How weird is
interesting.
that?
Yeah. That is very weird.
And so, you know, there's a concept of blue on blue.
Do you think it's not because, you know, he didn't want people to and people were intimidated by him?
Well, he was very intimidating. But he's dead, supposedly.
Now, yeah.
And last I checked, we were like, there are very few things that bring us all together. Lay off 12-year-old girls is probably a slogan that I think almost everyone can get behind.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. He, what makes me feel like maybe he's alive is, you know, a day before he died, he moved his money offshores. And in the movie, they're saying, oh, well, just to sock it to the victims, they can't sue him civilly. But is that the only reason?
Is it his money?
I don't know. They said that it was.
I don't believe that.
But
it's
it was.
his money.
It wasn't any billions. You know.
So assume that it's a few hundred million.
Yeah.
Okay.
But maybe that's all he had liquid. I
Assume
don't know.
that doesn't matter.
Right.
My question is, where did the money come from? If that money came from trading, we should have extensive records of his trading. And you can't go back. Like if I said to you, okay, Mike, we need to create a story that you're an investing billionaire. So we're going to come up with a 10-year history of all the great trades that you did to make yourself so rich.
A spreadsheet ain't gonna cut it.
Well, how are you going to do that? Because you have to say, like, what exact moment was that trade
Right.
filed? And then you
Yeah.
would see what the impact on the market
Yeah.
is. You can't just go back
Right.
and say, okay, I'm going to create an entire life and thread it through everything.
Right. Especially that amount of money.
No way.
Yeah.
So this just doesn't add up.
Nah. I don't. I'm sure it's in the ballpark of that. It's got to be. I mean, I don't know,
Again,
but
we don't have. One of the things that we have to learn is how not to say what we think it is. I don't need to say what I think it is. Let me tell you what it isn't. It is not being reported accurately, because anything you could ask that would fill in this story would be a sensational paper. I mean, it's a sensational article that you could write that would cause everyone to buy your paper and subscribe.
right.
So we know everyone cares, and we know no one's ever asked these questions. So what I'm doing is I'm mapping the silences. Is there a silence around Jeffrey Epstein and intelligence? There is. Is there a silence around Villard House? There is. Is there a silence around how he made his money? There is. Is there a silence around Ghislaine Maxwell's whereabouts? You keep seeing these stories about Ghislaine Maxwell, you know, takes action here. Where is this chick?
Right. That's so bizarre. Yeah.
Maybe she's just lost. Maybe she's in New Jersey.
One thing about it, it's a juicy story all the way around.
It is.
It's fascinating. The documentary was amazing in a bad way. It wasn't good, but it was an amazing documentary.
But we just stumbled over something, and it is imperative that we either find out what we stumbled over, or we consign ourselves to live as people with actually no rights. If we can't get an understanding of what a master pedophile was doing at the center of power,
right.
then maybe we're not a free country. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I think free, just like democracy, you have the right to vote, to choose who you want as your leaders. Here's your choices. pick.
Well, but
That's
in
not a
in the
choice.
Republican Party, they tried to do that, and Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him, figured out how to get around the fact that the Republican Party didn't want a democracy. The Democratic Party doesn't want one. But at least in the Republican case, there was enough of a pretense. Like in professional wrestling, you have two kinds of things you can do. Almost everything that takes place, they call a work. And a work is some scripted thing that is fake in essence.
Right.
If you don't go along with that and you actually try wrestling when you're supposed to be acting, they call it a shoot. Okay, well, hey man, I don't understand. You were supposed to be working and you shot on me. Okay.
Right.
Donald Trump shot on the Republican Party when it was supposed to be a work. Well, Bernie Sanders tried to shoot on the Democratic Party, but it was a work, so we went with first Hillary Clinton and now Joe Biden.
Was he just not strong enough?
Yeah, well, I've looked at this thing. The Democratic primary is not a primary. They just keep changing the rules. Like, here are the only events you can appear at, otherwise you're out of the race. So they're going to keep it to like CNBC and NPR and the New York Times. Just like, get the hell out of that pre-scripted nonsense and let us, let Joe Rogan or Sam Harris or Coleman Hughes, somebody else, ask the questions.
Right. To me, it's like you say, are we free? Just like I say, do we live in a democracy? I think as long as people are fat and happy, it doesn't matter.
Well, or you could see the power that we just put into the street. Look, let me bring up a little bit of my frustration about some of we just saw stuff in the street that was beautiful. We saw stuff in the street that was horrible. We saw stuff in the street that was next level human beings. We saw stuff that was unbelievably stupid. We saw stuff that was self-righteous. We saw stuff that was self-focused, and we saw stuff that was hopeful for change. We have got to talk about what it was that was going on right before George Floyd got murdered or got killed. I don't want to say before the trial. We were all pissed off about a million different things, and we've got to fix them all. This is not primarily an issue of policing blacks who are unarmed and murdering them in police custody. This is primarily about a world without hope. Young people don't feel like they have any hope. They don't feel like they have any purpose. The numbers bear them out. They're not as rich as they're supposed to be. Peak millennials should be starting their families. The people born at 1990, 1991, as my friend Peter Thiel points out, was the peak year. A lot of those people are never going to have their own babies, and those baby boomers are never going to hold their own grandchildren in their arms. And society is grinding to a very weird halt. And as a result, we're always upset. We don't know why we're upset. We don't know what we're asking for. We're not talking about data. We don't trust our experts. And the great danger of what we just went through is that it's not principally about policing. Like, if you gave me the choice, even to just talk about Black America and the criminal justice system, I'm not positive I wouldn't put my emphasis instead on sentencing and selective prosecution if given the choice.
Yeah.
So my feeling is, let's stay focused on what our real problems are. Our biggest problem affecting Black America is also affecting white America, which is that our economics are not hopeful. The median non-remarkable individual, and I think this was your point, that we can't only just talk about, like, let's say Black geniuses. We have to talk about the man in the middle.
Right.
The median individual, Black, white, male, female, trans, doesn't matter, is not doing well. And that person used to have hope because all of society was moving up. And that's not happening now.
Right.
If we don't figure out some cool stuff to do to give people purpose, not just money, we could UBI ourselves to death.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to feel like their life matters.
I think I feel like our country is diseased, is sick, and we need healing. I don't have the answer because it's so many areas that we need to be fixed, that we need healing at.
So why'd you call me up?
Because I feel like I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm actually trying to get out there and do something to really have some kind of impact, even if
feeling
it's in
called.
a city, even if it's in one city.
Yeah.
And I feel like you have the kind of brain power to help figure it out. You know, the level of thinking and reason that you bring to the table is amazing.
I'm very flattered to hear that. I got to tell you, I was very inspired when you reached out to me. Didn't know anything about you, and I was just also really disarmed by how badly I thought you wanted to sort of like, whatever this is, let's figure it out. But in part, that's it. We've got to start leading.
Correct. And, you know, I personally need guidance from people like you. You already guiding me without knowing.
Back at you. I learned a ton.
You know, so that's why when I reached out to you, when I wrote to you, you know, I wanted you to know I wasn't just trying to be adversarial with you. I respect you. I just wanted you to understand, like, because I hear a lot of things put out there, and I'm just like, nah, that's not it though. Like, yeah, you gotta hear it from us for real, right?
Do you think I've been evasive, or do you think I've been
No.
Yeah.
I think in your criticism, which I openly accept, to black people during this time of protests and whatnot, I thought some of it was the criticism wasn't being placed in the right place, right? I thought some of it was.
Well, say more about that.
I felt like I needed to elaborate on why we say certain things and do certain things, right? So there's a deeper understanding for you, hearing it from a black dude who's successful, fairly successful, but who's also been a victim of selective prosecution and sentencing. Like, literally, that was a big fight of my life. You know what I mean? So, and I won, but I can easily see how another guy in my position would not. It's so hard. It took me a lot to win that fight.
Wow, how many people, for example, plead guilty to things that they didn't do because the game theory says we can send you away for a long time. So how do you want to play it?
I know the game.
Well, I understand.
I know the game, and most of them don't. That's the thing.
But hopefully, I'm bringing some of my people to this podcast where they're going to tune into a voice, and they're going to stay and subscribe to yours.
Oh yeah,
right. And so the idea is that in part, I want to let them know that that there are games that you don't know about until you plug in, and a lot of us over on the white side of the fence have no experience with the criminal justice system up close and personal at the level that many black families do. And I think one of the things that you did that I thought was really helpful to me was you put some color on George Floyd, and you said, you know, even if he did horrible things, a lot of us black men have parts of our pasts that we're not comfortable with, where we did the wrong thing. And so we can also see past that, which is that people in extraordinary circumstances can be good people who've done terrible things, and you're discounting that. I thought that was profound.
I've seen it. I've been incarcerated, and people, for some reason, I was incarcerated.
What area of the country, just out of curiosity?
Here, well, LA and Arizona.
Okay.
The case was in Arizona, but I got arrested here for it, and I sat here for a while until I was extradited there. So, and I was there longer. And when I was here, I was isolated. So I wasn't really dealing with anybody. It was just, it's horrible. But anyway, when I'm there, I'm just observing, and my life was good. You know, I was businessman, everything positive. It was just these things from the past I had to deal with. So people were coming to me just to talk, just to be around me, because when I came, people feared me, and people it's all racial in jails on the West Coast. So it's always a leader of each race, and they tried to make me the leader. I was like, nah, I'm cool. But the other races still came to me as the head, because I wasn't in there just trying to fight people, and I was just calm, but they respected me. So everybody would come to me and talk, and I would have people way older than me trying to convince me that they're good people, And I'm like, I'm a very empathetic person, but I'm a realist as well. And I'm like, this guy's, first of all, it's crazy. You'll see there's so many people on this planet that nobody cares about. They have no family. Like, when they get arrested, their wives change their phone number, you know? Like, people are relieved that they're gone. So, and everybody in jail is not supposed to be there. It's an accident. It's a misunderstanding. I'm like, okay, bro, okay. So, you know, I seen low character a lot in there, but I also seen people who are just victims of their circumstance.
Yeah.
But they've been victims so long, they'll never get it right. I seen it. And everybody in there was on psych meds.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing. I thought I'm missing out on something. Like, why do they keep lining up every day? What is that? Am I supposed to be there? It's psych meds. Everybody in there. I don't know why.
Well, you didn't do that.
No.
All right.
No.
Almost
Most people, right. Most people in there, I think, have some drug dependency or something.
Yeah.
And
but this is also just our general feeling of hopelessness. Like, I can't tell you how many people whose lives, by historical standards, are much better than people who've gone before them.
Okay.
But that we have a situation in
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Jess, text Rob Bailey. He's in that group thread. Tell him I'm wrapping up. And we'll be 5-10 minutes late. Okay? He's in the thread from this morning when they're trying to book me for that thing in Salt Lake. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. Back in.
I think that this gets back to this issue of pointless lives, where even when people are doing pretty well by historical standards, it's harder to give meaning to meaning, as I like to say.
Yeah.
That they can't figure out how to say, well, this is something that's worth potentially risking my life for, or sacrificing 10 years for, or do I care about the world after I die? And I think this is one of the biggest distinctions, is that a lot of us don't care about the world beyond. And the one place that gets reversed is if you happen to have children, even if you didn't want the children, even if they happened to you by accident. It's hard not to care about the world that your children are going to live in, because that's our answer to immortality.
Correct.
Making babies is our answer to dying. And I don't think people who are afraid to have children, like, this is a scary time. Have your babies now. Don't pretend that, like, the world might get better and that the time to do it is later. How many people had babies during World War II? How many people had babies during the worst of Jim Crow? Whatever it is. You got to have confidence in future and ownership going forward, because too many people can't find the meaning in their lives.
Yeah, I maybe because I've always been aware of history and my heritage, and my father is a man of character. He may not have had much, but he never, my father didn't get passed down a trust. Couldn't help me financially with college, anything. But my father gave me, like, wisdom, and he taught me how to be a man. And, excuse me. So I've always looked at life like I can't wait for my turn to do something good for somebody.
Well, that's beautiful.
Or for people. A friend of mine, he had to have heart transplant, and they thought that he needed a kidney, was it? Kidney transplant? Yeah. People get kidneys, not livers, yeah. And I was like, I got you. Check, I got you. You need one, I got you. I got two. He ended up not needing it, but I'm okay with anything like that, because what else is life about? And also, I want my sons to be honorable people and not selfish people, because you get so much more out of life with that. We go out, like, I do a lot of events all over the country. And I was like, when I was in Miami for a while, and I don't like do anything on the weekends, like go out, and people follow me. So I'm like, okay, I call people up. Yo, if y'all want to help me tonight with something, show up to my gym. I have a kitchen in my gym. We bought all this food, prepared food. I had all the people that came out go out in the streets with me in the slums and give people food and water and stuff like that. And I seen how excited these kids were. You know, I'm out here with Mike Rashid feeding the homeless. And that can look goofy to some people, but I thought that was cool. And I tell them every time we do this, whatever city we in, I said, this is not putting a dent in homelessness, but I want to give y'all, like, plant that seed of service in y'all, just so that things y'all can focus on things that's important, not yourself, and not, you know, things that are not important. And I feel like caring about other people is important. Doing nice things for people who can't do anything for you is important.
Well, I love what you said about your dad, which is that your dad passed something to you, and it wasn't in the form of a trust fund, but it was in the form of wisdom. I fear that a lot of people now didn't have much passed by their parents. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they don't understand that they have an opportunity and an obligation to induct, to mentor, there have to be rites of passage. And it, you know, like, I didn't really have an advisor. And people think sometimes that I'm arrogant about the fact that I didn't, like, all PhDs have advisors and you didn't really.
Right.
I had somebody sign my thesis, but he wasn't my advisor. No, in fact, there's something beautiful about a rite of passage and about being inducted, you know, and this idea of graduating or matriculating or being called is super important. And I think one of the things is that a lot of us who have a marginal relationship with it, maybe just in the case of your dad, or, you know, I can point to one or two people who might have given me a little bit. From that, I have to invent a process called mentoring and induction and bringing people up. And they're hungry for it because let's be blunt about it. We men were not taught how to be men sufficiently. And as a result, there's a huge discomfort with masculinity, with maleness. And, you know, there's this beautiful thing I saw in France where some baby is like hanging by, you know, off of a ledge. And this immigrant from Africa just like scales the building like Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, it was recent, yeah.
Yeah, it was not too long ago. You know, and like, okay, well, thank God for men. That was a very, I'm not saying that no woman in the world could do it, but in general, 9 times out of 10, if somebody's going to go straight up a building to save somebody else's child that they've never met, it's going to be some dude.
Correct.
And I think that in part, even if we weren't trained to be men, we've got to invent that, because those 2 generations below us, the millennials and the Gen Z kids, they deserve to be inducted into something. Now, the fact that I wasn't inducted into something means I'm going to have to fake something in my own mind so that I can pass on a chain that was never passed to me. But I'm convinced that what you're doing is the right thing. And to get back to to close one thread, I would love to do something that is not about people of color, but is specifically black in terms of science and technology and analytics. And I would love to figure out with you, to keep talking about how to use this show and some others to get the super high-end black talent in front of the world that needs no apology for anything, and just get people excited about black analytic ability. And then let's have the conversations about all this stupid stuff. But until I can actually show you who you've already got on your team, I don't even want to have the conversation, because if you don't know these people, let me tell you, you're in for a treat.
Right. Okay, we got to close, but I want to go on something that you said on the phone. It's hard to like really eradicate racism without like more relationships between blacks and whites, and that's so true, because people are going to have their prejudices regardless, and that's a normal thing. I'm not even looking down on that.
Right.
You don't know, and it's intelligent to be kind of fearful of the unknown. That's what keeps you alive and safe. However, when you do have relationships with people who don't look like you, you understand them more, you know, and you're more comfortable with them. So you're more comfortable with someone that looks like them, and you know, you feel a part of that, and vice versa. So I think there's a huge thing with that, and you know, people should. I am just an adventurous person. Yeah. If it was back then, I would have been an explorer or something. Like, I'm not afraid of that what's around the corner. So I'm excited about it. Like, let's discover whatever we can. So with new relationships with different people, it's all fascinating to me and interesting. And just like you do recognize like the brilliance in black people, that excellence in someone like you it can't go without that's a thing, and I think the merging of the two would be so powerful. You know, like if this country really collaborated for real, respected each other and collaborated. Man, it's crazy. You know, it's so crazy. We got so many.
We got so much over here.
Yeah.
I know.
So I think that's something that should be nurtured. Those are seeds that need to be planted and nurtured, you know, and cultivated, because maybe we'll be all right in a couple hundred years, but we got to recognize the greatness that's here. This is the greatest country on the planet by far, in my opinion, at least. I'm not saying the most ethical, but I don't want to be nowhere but here.
Well, that's the thing, but part of that has to do with being proud of something which is in part embarrassing. Like if you know U.S. history, some of it is pretty embarrassing how horrible we've been to ourselves and each other and others. And
one thing that I don't feel like we graduated to, my first time going to Germany.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know anything. I'm thinking it's going to be racist and Nazis and skinheads. Matter of fact, on the train, I was in Holland before that to Germany. The conductor sounded like Hitler, what I thought Hitler sounded like, you know. When I got there, beautiful people.
Yeah.
You know, really nice, warm people. And, you know, I wanted to know what they thought about their past. And collectively, from the people I knew out there, they were like, they recognized it and they were embarrassed about their past. And it just made I was happy for that, but it made me sad that no one's embarrassed about the past here.
But I'll tell you the other part of that, though, which is I am more scared when people are embarrassed and self-hating than when people are knowledgeable and they have the right kind of level of responsibility.
Okay, let me elaborate on that. I understand that. That was the energy that I felt. It was an embarrassment. Like, I can't believe we did that. Like, our people did that.
Right.
It was that kind of energy, and I thought that was very immature and big of them. I don't know collectively of the country, of course.
Yeah.
I know nothing about their politics. I don't know anything about Germany other than it seemed like a very well-ran place, and I like their cars. But the people that I know out there, they talked about it. They had no problem. They knew a lot about it. They were very knowledgeable on it.
They do, but then there's the self-hating component, which is scaring me, which is one of the reasons why, you know, like, here's a terrible transmission mechanism. Assume you feel guilty about atrocities, genocide committed within living memory in your country. And then as a result of that, let's imagine that you throw open your doors to a level of immigration that you can't handle. And then you get a backlash. And now people are like, I'm tired of feeling guilty. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that. That's when things get super scary.
Right.
And so for me, I've actually talked about, should German-Jewish reconciliation be a top priority just at the, like, we're about to lose the last people who went through the Holocaust because they're all old at this point.
Right.
Both the perpetrators, you know, are very few and far between, almost all of them dead. This is the right time for Jews to potentially extend a hand to modern Germans and saying, don't overdo the guilt and the shame. This isn't you.
Okay.
And in part, this is my great concern about the story of Black America. Like, no person in my family was in this country during slavery. Nobody's enslaved anybody. We were being persecuted as Jews in the Ukraine. Right. And somebody tells me, you should pay reparations. Like, to who? Am I going to get reparations? I mean, to me, that's a joke. It's about something deadly serious. And the thing that it's about... I
want to know more about your perspective on that.
No, sure. Yeah. But it's about something serious. It's about, and this, tell me if this resonates with you, it may not. Right now, part of the problem of race relations is about humiliation. It's about ongoing harm. It's about historical harm, but it's also about humiliation, which is like, you must see me as the kind of person who has to put up with your bullshit. And I don't want to be that person. And that's one of the reasons why actually just pointing to the outsized contribution of Black America to the American tapestry is so important to me, which is, you know, what are you talking about? Like, how much have you already rewritten my life? Do you have any idea whose posters were on my walls when I was growing up? Who did I want to be like? Who did I want to think like? Like, do you have any idea that if I died, you could offer me several kinds of person to come back as?
Right.
Where Black American would have been in that list? Do you think it's at the bottom? Do you think I would want to do anything other than that? Do you think it's at the top? You don't know.
But I do think that you're putting your perspective on the majority of the white consensus for white men in this country. And I do think that you are a minority.
I appreciate that, but let me tell you something. You can't, there's an old terrible joke, which is, what is the definition of a kike? And the answer is the Jewish gentleman who's just left the room. Every room you walk into, you're black. When I walk into a room, I can tell you that there are often no black people there, and people talk. It's very seldom that I actually hear people with the worst of that bigoted stuff. A little bit I heard it in finance. But in general, most of that has been long dead. What I do see
That's
what I do see
your existence, though.
Yeah, but it's partially my existence. It's also partially this issue of structural bigotry and racism, which is suffused through the structure so that no particular person has to do the wrong thing,
Right.
and they can just benefit from it.
Right,
So
right.
I think that that's much more important.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that's really important to me is that, this issue of love harder. One of the things we found out when everybody went into the streets, how few white people have close black friends with which they can talk about like all of the cross currents going on just inside of the black experience in America. It's not, there is no black community in the way that most white people think. Well, the black community thinks a million different things that go in all different directions.
Right.
The key thing that you're pointing to is getting to the point of love and trust, where we're spending time with each other and learning from each other in ways that no public service announcement is ever going to get close to. You can't watch Ebony and Ivory 1,000 times and learn anything because it's not in a beautiful gesture, because it's just not where it happens.
Correct. I was joking with someone the other day. I said, because I was expressing how I don't care about, I'm not loyal to Democrat or Republican Party. I said we need a new party, the Love Party, and I was joking, but that's what we need. We need, I really wish that the American people would think more independently and not rely on the notions that's put out in the media to be the dominant notion that they have to live by or believe in and prescribe to, and understand that, be more critical of politicians. Just because your family was this and everybody was this, and this guy represents your team, if he's a fucked up person, fuck him, and not be loyal to any, like, Sean and I was talking because we were like researching different organizations to potentially put money, make some donations and collaborate with to do some work. And he brought up a concern of his because we heard that this particular organization donates to whatever said party, and I was just like, well, it makes sense because those are the issues that But I said we need that. We need some kind of. We need policymakers.
We need to affect both of these parties by giving them a coherent message that we're not going to put up with this bullshit.
That's what the people need to do.
I know, and the problem is that the street is partially speaking, but the street is not coherent enough to be heard.
Right.
And so you're going to get a lot of these experiments where people are going to say, how do we pander to this thing so we can get these people off our backs? But the key thing, is that we need a coherent list of demands that have to do with making sure that young people have a future.
Right.
Because if they're bought in and they have things that they're trying to protect, and then they're struggling with the whole thing, like, is this my country? And so at some level, this doesn't feel like a lot of people's countries. I don't feel like that's my Democratic Party.
Right.
I've been loyal to it, but I'm sick of it. And right now, the important thing is we need something other than these two old farts competing for the presidency of the United States.
Correct. It's so ridiculous as a conscious black man in this country to see Pelosi and all of them with the kente cloth. I'm like, come on, guys, what are you doing?
Well, it's like if they suddenly started speaking Yiddish and offering me chicken soup.
Right. It's like it's kind of offensive. Can we not be okay with this? You know what I mean? But it's interesting because I seen no prominent black people speaking about it at all. I don't know if people were speaking about it or not, but you don't see that on the news.
Well, that's the thing is that you don't see black skepticism unless you go to these voices that are seen, through the coon lens of, oh, well, that guy is, he's stumping for the Republican Party. That's the meal ticket. But the issue of smart black people just say, oh, come on, man. What are you doing?
Right. So, listen, I see so much, and I've been very vocal during this whole process, but I kind of fell back a little bit after a conversation we had, let me not be as, I don't know. Maybe I should speak in code a little bit more.
A little bit, but think about what Killer Mike did in Atlanta, right? This issue. So one of the areas that I'm blown away by the Black American contribution is oratory, and his command of not only the language but cadence, his ability to talk, and he talked about we have to beat up that prosecutor at the ballot box. It's like, okay, there's a pause, and
right.
You're using physical violence, and you're channeling it.
100%.
Well, it's like, what did James Brown do after Martin Luther King died? He kept the country from going up in flames. And, Killer Mike was evidencing, I don't know anything about the guy. I don't know whether I'd agree with his politics.
He's an awesome person. I love him.
Is that?
Yeah. He's very, he's for the cause, wholeheartedly. And he's not a racist. His partner, he has a rap group. It's him and another guy. He's a Jewish guy, white guy. So he's, he has a show on Netflix called, what is it called? Oh, Trigger Warning. It's real good. It's really good. It's excellent, actually. So it's about black issues, and it's creative, and it's funny, and it's gonna look. Here's the thing: white people are offended by. White people love our culture, but some of our culture, white people are offended by because it looks violent. It feels violent. I watched an interview. Have you ever seen an interview of Louis Farrakhan on Donahue?
No.
It's really interesting. He's very calm and speaking, and lady said, "You just seem so violent." And we're all like, huh? Because when black people speak, passionately, he wasn't even passionate on the show, but when we speak passionately, we're passionate people. I think anyone's passionate about what they really believe in, but, and there's no leaning towards violence at all. It's perceived as violent.
Well, it depends what you mean. If you think about Malcolm X and his gift for oratory, I mean, I love listening to him speak. It's just what a gift.
Correct.
On the other hand, there's no question that what he's saying is, hey, do you have any idea how violent you guys are? So what if we met you as equals?
Right. But that's recognizing why we think.
Well, I'm just saying he's making a very reasonable argument. He's saying,
for sure.
You're this violent,
and
you expect me to cower in front of you to show you how nonviolent I am. And again, it's idiosyncratic versus systemic violence. And so effectively, white America is extremely systemically violent, and black America is idiosyncratically violent.
Right.
And that's it's an interesting exchange rate between the two.
And I guess there would have to be a conversation. Is that wrong? Is it wrong to retaliate or to defend?
Don't you need a Malcolm X to back up your Martin Luther King because it's not very powerful? If the street doesn't threaten violence, people always talk about peaceful demonstration. Cut the crap. The most peaceful demonstration is an implied ability to convert to violence.
Correct.
And that's why it works.
Listen, if we don't have the capacity for violence, we're just a victim.
Well, this is what Gandhi said.
That's it.
Gandhi said, violence is preferable to pacifism. The enemy is pacifism. So he had three layers. The pacifist is a coward.
Right.
The violent person is not quite brave enough to try the ultimate, which is nonviolence, which is not pacifism. People confuse the two.
What is nonviolence?
Nonviolence is a pre-commitment. So my favorite example is not Martin Luther King or
Malcolm.
Gandhi. It's Dick Gregory.
Okay.
Dick Gregory and his wife, who was pregnant, said, the civil rights cause is more important than our lives and our family. And no matter what they do to us, we will not try to protect ourselves or each other. Like, try to imagine, you're Dick Gregory, your pregnant wife might be being kicked by a policeman. And you agree that we are not going to defend ourselves, not because you're cowards, but because you're so badass that you're going to say, I'm going to throw away my most potent weapon to defend myself, and you can do whatever thing, but if you kill me, Lord knows what you're going to do for my cause, right? So Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Dick Gregory and these guys were next level brave, where Gandhi hated the cowardice of pacifism. He said violence is definitely preferable. He's very clear on it. And I think that that's part of what's going on is that the street, one of the reasons that the looting was so unfortunate is that violence is much more powerful if the sword is kept in the sheath and rattled than if you start to show it.
Right. Yeah. And listen, was there black people looting? Yeah. But black people,
Were there white people vandalizing? There were.
100%. That was opportunist.
Well, or some of it might have been programmed. I don't even know what it was.
I can assure you it wasn't black. Because listen, I'm going to tell you something. In jail, it's very racial, and the guards set it up. They make it like that. And they put whites and Mexicans together and blacks separate. And blacks really just, it would be a few of us, and we'd tear everything up.
Yeah.
Like, if blacks decided to loot and terrorize, it would be crazy. It would be atrocious because we do have the great potential of, I don't know, we're just wild sometimes, you know? And we grow up fighting each other and, you know, survival of the fit in our own little community. And
but you also have a lot of abilities to diffuse situations.
100%. 100%. But that's why I'm saying this little bit, because if you look at it, the looting that happened, it was nothing. It wasn't crazy. So if it was us really doing it, we would have tore a lot of shit up and burnt a lot of shit down, and it would have been bad. But I don't condone looting. You know, I don't think that we should. Like, I'm not with that. We actually was out to try to mitigate that because I didn't want to blur the lines on our cause. I didn't want to take the attention away from it. And if I had to be out there myself, like running people off, I was there doing it. So put that. But to me, that's a small byproduct of a way bigger issue, you know. So that's not I'm not preaching against looting.
No, we have to have a really long, involved conversation also about what do we make of a police that is both militarized and so more threatening because they've got armored personnel carriers and all sorts of next level weaponry, but also militarized with sublethal rounds like beanbags and foam and all this like
I can
weird
say this
stuff.
From what I saw with my own eyes. At a protest in Scottsdale, I went out there, like, you know, because I happened to be in Arizona when protest was kicking off, and there were police agitating people, aiming at everybody was peaceful, and they were agitating people, and people were getting louder and more riled up, and I decided to leave. I'm like, it's hurting my heart. I see what's going on.
Well, in part, our police forces have also been coordinated. If you look at what happened during Occupy, they cleared out all of these Occupy encampments at the end in one weekend, I think, because the police forces have been fused with corporate America. So there are these programs, I forget what the name of it is, where the police force is in fact sharing data with investment banks and other entities and things. We don't know what our police force is. We don't know what a militarized police force with sublethal rounds, with coordination between individual police departments, with cooperation and confederation with corporate America. We are talking about a structure that we don't know. And in part, one of the things that I think is really important is to use black familiarity with the problems of the criminal justice system to inform us. Because I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm most upset about is that we're at a bit of a fork in the road, where most folks who look like me are afraid to talk to you because if you start to say, well, what about this and what about that? I'm like, I don't know anything about it. Please don't hurt me. Until we actually get to the point where we're hanging out at each other's barbecues and we're babysitting for each other's
enough to have those discussions,
drunk.
Right.
Then we're not going to get to that magical place. And one of the things that I hate is I'm looking at my community and they are scared to open their mouth. People getting fired for not giving their students, off during exams to go protest, or what if you question? Like, I'm going to question. I don't think this was all about Black Lives Matter. I think that it happened that we were all upset about a million things, and then we got George Floyd's execution video effectively, and suddenly we're all crazy for a very good reason, understandable reason. But it's also the case that right now the biggest emergency we've got to get back to being the United States of America and stop constantly going between self-love and self-hatred. We need a reasonable plan to lift hundreds of millions of people into a future that makes us proud to be, each other's countrymen.
Indeed, I agree with you. I think the very first step is to have a real, honest, open dialogue about the real history of this country, because it's not taught. And like what you experienced, because I never got those lessons in New York, but I heard, in the South, you guys were indoctrinated with an alternate reality of, what happened.
Sean, what's your family background? So I have an idea.
I'm Iranian.
Yeah?
Yeah. My parents are both first-generation immigrants. They came here to be educated in college and then made their lives here, and I was born here and raised here.
They came just after the revolution?
No, they came before the revolution.
Okay.
Yeah. They came to study. They didn't come for political asylum or anything like that. They came to study. My dad, completely penniless, just came because he had an opportunity to come. My mom was a little bit more privileged and was sent to be educated, particularly, along with many of her brothers and sisters, 8 of them. So yeah, they came here, different experiences, but for the same reason, to the land of opportunity. What we're taught that it was, and what I think you're saying we want to get back to.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to me, in part, okay, so we got the Iranian guy, the Jewish guy, the black guy. This is normal to me, and I think what I didn't understand.
It is. This is normal.
This is normal.
This is America.
This is America.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people who are either talking lovingly about multiculturalism or hatefully about it don't actually live it. Like, one of the things that I've got interracial children. I never thought about them as being interracial children until race was talked about every 4 seconds.
Right.
And quite honestly, it's been negative in my life, not because I wasn't aware of racial issues, but because it's both important to remember them when you're supposed to remember them and forget them when you're supposed. Like, there are lots of times when it's just not, you're making a good point. It has nothing to do with our racial backgrounds. It's very frustrating that I now can't divorce anything from race. It's not like.
Yeah. And trust me, I don't want to be talking about this all the time. I don't, and I usually don't.
But I do, and I don't, and I do, and I don't. And now it's giving me a headache.
The only reason that I do is to try to
get past it.
Well, to non-black people that don't get it, to try to help them understand it in a cohesive way. And I've had many conversations with people that just didn't understand, and they got it. They're like, I didn't even know.
That's why I did a walk and talk on my Instagram feed, or maybe it was on YouTube Live, where I talked about lynching postcards, and the number of people who came to me and said, I had no idea about what, the concept of lynching wasn't explicit enough for me to understand the the trauma, the horror that comes out of it.
Just that postcard was violence that you talk about is visual, mental, and it makes us, the strange fruit, look like not humans, because no human would be treated that way, and to other people. And then it makes us, when we see it, like, oh, shit, they don't give a fuck about us, So a huge, a lot of the anger in the black community is feeling like, well, nobody gives a fuck. Nobody cares.
Well,
So-
on that point, though, how interesting that song of the century, arguably, for the 20th century,
Strange Fruit.
was
Written by a white man.
it was written by a Jewish man and sung by the most gifted of all black jazz singers, right? So
Yeah.
the idea is that
Talking about Strange Fruit, if you didn't catch that.
the Billie Holiday and Abel Meerpool was the writer. We got to get back to that hybrid vigor.
That collaboration.
Yeah.
Listen.
That's why I drove an hour to come see
And
you.
I'm so appreciative that you did.
I'm so appreciative that you reached out.
Disinfected everything a million times over to make sure everything was good for you.
That's perfect.
But yeah, this is what I really wanted to talk about. We didn't even touch. We didn't get there yet, but we will.
I do have a
And-
perspective that
Okay.
that I wanted to bring up for people, because you said you were surprised that you didn't have as many black friends based on how much you enjoy a lot of aspects of the culture. I've kind of been the opposite. I've always had a lot of black friends. Just for whatever reason, we've got along well, and it's the combination of the opportunity too. I've been around a lot of black people in different places I've lived. But something that I think people don't get, especially I have the story of my own parents being immigrants, seeing this as the land of opportunity. I don't know that black people have ever gotten to look at it that way, that this is the land of opportunity, because it's kind of been like this land that everyone's excited to come to. Even when my parents came, people came from all areas of the world and viewed this as the place they could build something. All the while, black people were kind of held down in this environment that they could walk on now. And then, like you said, a lot of these things where people of color are all being lumped together. Well, black people are like, well, wait a minute, we never really got addressed. Like the injustice that we went through and the things that set us back were never really dealt with. And now we're just going to treat us all the same when there's something that's gone on here that wasn't really fixed.
Even it's and I'm that's a good point, and I'm empathetic about everyone. The LGBT, it's extra letters now, but we're lumped in with that as well now, and I'm just like, all right, but you're right, we do feel like that, and we don't feel included in the big conversation, especially when our president, says things like I was watching C-SPAN when he was doing he was meeting with, I don't know if they got their president or prime minister, whatever it's called in Norway, but there's a woman, and he says, I want to do business with great countries like Norway, not shit countries, not those shit countries, speaking of African countries, and Haiti was thrown in there. And I was like, well, thanks, bro. Thanks.
He's kind of a dick.
Yeah, but that shouldn't be allowed, and we know that he's not a king. Everybody else, everyone else should be around him should be like, bro, that's not fucking cool. It just makes us feel like, oh, well, things are back to the way they were,
Yeah, but they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that in part, it was very interesting what happened with Obama. First of all, Obama, half white, half East African, not descended from graduate students, not slaves.
Right.
On the other hand, treated to some of the prejudice that come from that. So you know, it's like super complicated.
Yeah.
And then you had a weird thing, again, one of these like multiple issues at the same time. You had a lot of white racists who voted for Obama because they thought he was better for the country. So you weirdly, you couldn't tell like who's bigoted, who was voted for what.
Right.
What is the Obama legacy? I know that, in a weird way, a lot of racists went through this idea that, okay, the world is coming to an end because we have somebody who looks like Obama, and certainly Michelle, this like incredibly elegant, hot black first lady, blew their minds. Now you've got this weird thing where Trump may actually not be as bigoted as he appears, but he's certainly willing to play with bigotry if it gets him.
Is that not bigotry though?
It's an interesting question. I have the sense, in part, that he doesn't really believe anything. He goes through, like, if you told me that the leader of Mali in Africa was coming to see him and that he was going to ink some deal, I could easily imagine him saying, the American people have always been friends with the beautiful people of the beautiful country of Mali.
Right.
And then if Mali turned on him, he'd be like that flea-bitten.
Yeah.
There is
That's interesting, and I can see that. I can see that because this is what I thought of him going into the presidency. I thought he was pandering and playing towards that part of the base because that's a big voting
Well, but
You know, but I didn't think he was really.
But Mike, think about it this way: we are all conflicted, and when we represent ourselves as like having our shit sorted out, we are lying. You know, so I'm pretty sure that I'm, for the most part, a pretty decent student of Black achievement, and but do I have zero bigoted thoughts that ever go through my mind? I don't know one Black person who can claim that they have no. I have anti-Semitic thoughts that go through my mind as a Jewish person. You know,
I can honestly say I don't.
you may or may not.
Maybe I don't.
But like if I start
maybe
talking,
I don't know enough about the Jewish culture
if I
to
started talking
have.
to you about Jewish record executives who signed Black artists in the 50s and took them for every penny they had because they weren't smart enough to know what they were signing, I guarantee you'd have an anti-Semitic thought.
But why would I have I would say fuck that guy.
Yeah, but there was a whole bunch of them. Like in other words,
fuck all of those guys. But why I wouldn't? No, I'm being 100% honest with you.
Okay.
Me, I'm not lumping all Jews in with that.
no, but what I'm trying to say is that when you talk about
And
a problem
if
with,
I do bash,
yeah,
let's say out of 100 Jews, it's 10 of them that's
Yeah.
evil. These evil Jews, these
Yeah.
10 evil
Yeah.
Jews
Yeah.
that we have empirical evidence that these 10 guys are evil. Is that bigotry?
well, here's the thing. I notice that I am aware of a very predatory sector of the business world, some of whom are Jews and quite proud of it. Right? People say, you never give the other guy an even break. Everybody's out for themselves. We got to get ours, blah, 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 blah. I recognize that. Just the way, for example, you probably recognize some guy saying, you know, the problem is that the white man has kept us down, and we've got to give him in the same terms that he's given it to us because they only understand the language of violence.
Right.
Now, I don't respect that perspective. I recognize that is part of the Black world because I'm dialed into it.
Right.
Do I recognize negative Jewish things, negative Black things? Like certainly, there's no question of saying that Iran has, been in the forefront of some real horrors with what came in to deal with the problems that were the Shah and going far in the other direction. We've all got our shit. We just do.
But being critical
Yeah.
of evil people that's in a different ethnic group,
We get sloppy.
is that bigotry though?
When I said to you that white society is more systemically violent, that's me being critical of how we bury our violence. So my point to you is that, like when you're talking about the hadiths, I can tell you so many of the good points of Islamic culture, and I can tell you some of the negative points of Islamic culture.
All right, so on religion, I'm not team religion at all.
Yeah.
But I think that generally speaking, they're all good. Like I feel like generally speaking, any kind of government,
They're all mixed.
capitalism, communism.
But you can say,
I think anything is just
Mike, you can say
utility.
differences between
It's just
them.
utility, right? It's just how people use it and how it's used. I want to ask you this: Muhammad Ali, he did an interview somewhere in the United Kingdom,
Yeah.
in the '60s, and they were asking him. They said, "Do you, when he joined the Nation of Islam, they said, do you really feel like all white people are? He said, we're all devils.
Yeah.
He said, I never said you. He said, we in London.
Yeah.
I said, I deal with the white people in America.
Yeah.
And he said how I've been treated, and then he started listing things, atrocities that our government was, clearly behind. He said, wouldn't you say that guy's a devil? And the guy was like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it wasn't generalizing all white people.
No, of course. But you see, like the Tuskegee medical experiment, you were talking about like using people in medical experiments.
Exactly.
That's some effed up shit.
It's horrible.
And if you ask me, if I get myself into that frame of mind, I'd say like, what the hell's wrong with white people? That would be an incautious thought.
Right.
Now, can you wake me out of that and say, oh, did you just realize what you just said? Did you just blame all white people? Wasn't that just a few bad apples? Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. When you actually become comfortable, you can say, look, there's no culture on earth that doesn't have a problem with violence.
Right.
Right? It might be different kinds of violence. There might be different aspects to culture. The admonition to kill the apostate comes from Judaism, not from Islam. But on the other hand, Islam has probably activated that more times than Jews ever had from the passage in Deuteronomy.
Right.
So when we get to know each other, all of this mixed bag stuff starts to come out. And what I'm trying to get back to is the idea is I don't think Donald Trump is a highly consistent person. I think different things breeze through his mind. And when we're looking for racists and bigots, we don't often have an idea that that's like a part of their brain that's not always active. And sometimes it's much more complicated in that you'll find somebody who is fetishizing. Like a lot of the times that we see somebody who's vehemently anti-homosexual, you're going to find out that they're going to be found in an airplane
putting their
bathroom, doing something under the stall, who knows what. And what's going on there? It's very often we love and hate the same things that excite our passions. And I think that this is a much better clue to the weirdness of black-white relations, which is white America is fascinated. And it's love, hate, give me more, give me less. It just doesn't settle down.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
But what need to be understood is while white America plays that game, we're just trying to breathe. We're just trying to survive.
Well, but what black America is playing that game right back at white America.
How so?
Well, I think that there are lots of ways in which, like, you'll see the same thing where people will fetishize a fair complexion, light-skinned blacks, you know.
Well,
wait.
Okay, go ahead.
And, you know, on the other hand, there'll be, like, the same people who will be engaged in black pride and black consciousness-raising exercises will be in the self-hating thing. Like, we have to lift ourselves up. You know, we keep screwing ourselves over. We
but is that self-hatred, or is that like trying to get your family to step it up?
It depends where your energy is, and like, and you can. I think that there's plenty of basis for mistrust, and I think that there's also plenty of basis for trust, and those are two separate things. One doesn't cancel the other out,
right?
And so that's sort of what I was trying to say about, like, with the Fred Hampton thing. If you believe that your government, like, we had an active anti-black political process going through our FBI up through the 1970s at a minimum. I don't even know whether it continues to go on. I am suspicious about whether or not we use incarceration to deprive black folks of the vote. I don't know that that's the case.
I mean, that tactic was enabled when we were allowed to vote.
Yeah. Well, to say nothing of poll taxes, to say nothing of literacy tests.
Yeah.
Like, all of the games that white Americans have used to, or take Robert Moses in New York City, putting the bridge to Jones Beach at a very low height so that a tour bus can't use it to bring black people to a beach he was trying to keep as white as possible. Or the fact that he dumps the Triborough Bridge into Harlem because he's using the architecture of the goddamn city.
Right.
In a racial fashion.
Right.
So all of this stuff, black America would be crazy to ignore it. On the other hand, there's so much energy to say, what is this crap? Like, I don't want to live in that world.
Yeah. It's exhausting. It is, you know, and especially when we're all still trying to, like, all right, we're black Americans, but we're Americans too, and we're just trying to, like, have success and be happy and raise our kids. But we got to deal with that layer, and it's hard. Like, you know, I sometimes I sit and I say, should I give a fuck about all of this? Should I just stay in my bubble and make sure me and mine are good? But I got to look at myself in the mirror at night. I'm like, you know, you being a coward.
Do you drink?
Yeah, but not heavy. But
well, I don't think we should do it heavy. But like, I would be happy to do some podcasting on these and other topics over a little bit of alcohol and some decent food, and get into stuff, because, like, you know, this is what I did with Stefan, and you know, it's very funny when I podcast Eric Lewis, who's, like, by the way, one of the world's greatest piano players. Check him out.
Okay.
You know, he started making fun of me when he was at the keyboard. And he starts writing this, like, because normally we don't talk about race that much. We talk about music.
Right.
And so I started talking to him about race. And so he's at the keyboard. He starts writing the song on the spot. He goes, Eric, you're so beautifully white, and I'm so incredibly black.
Right.
So, fuck you, Eric. And so I go over and I started playing blues triplets on top of that, just to, like, send it back. Intimacy is the thing that could save us, which is, what if we actually find out that we just really enjoyed hanging out?
And that's usually the case. That's usually the case. All right, we got to end this, but I'm going to leave it on this. All right, so in my little stint of incarceration, when I get into my cell, my roommate is white, right? So in the jail politics, races can't feed each other. They can't help each other, whatever. So he, they had a meeting. The whites had a meeting about me. So he told me, and I listen, I'm a thinker, so I get it. So he was like, just so you know, the meeting was about you. The first thing that kick off, everybody's gonna jump you. So I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm not worried about it. So that Friday, we have what's called a spread. So we get commissary on Friday. I bought a bunch of stuff, and what you do is you make like a big long burrito type, weird, unhealthy, delicious, little delicate, little treat, and you share it amongst yourselves. So I gave him all the items, and he says, "How many do you want?" And I said, "Bring one for me and one for him." The white dude. He was like, "Okay," and he went and he did it. Everything was cool. Nothing was wrong. Like, my pod was so weird.
Yeah.
Because I made it weird because everybody was kind of dealing with each other. And it wasn't, people look at me, you know, they just look at the exterior. And like, yo, this guy's going to be a problem. That's why the meeting was like, jump this guy. Whenever something, we got to neutralize that potential threat. And they seen that I'm just a guy.
Right.
Just trying to like get out of here, you know, and I'm honest with them. And I've stopped a lot of fights from happening. And it was like a sigh of relief from them. And we got to really talk. Everybody just dealt with each other as people. 'Cause look, everybody in here fucked up. I'm telling people like, bro, stop. Man, they violated my rights. I said, bro, we in jail. You have no rights. Just write it out. You know what I'm saying? They all loved it and appreciated it. That's why they all came to talk to me so much. And but at the end of the day, it's like I'm comfortable anywhere.
Yeah.
I've been dropped off in other countries, no English, non-English speaking countries, and I figure it out. So, but a lot of blacks are not comfortable around whites and vice versa. You know what I mean? So we just need that experience with each other, and everything is chill. Racism don't stand up face to face.
Not when there's good food.
Exactly. Racism don't stand up face to face. You know what I mean?
It's a lot. You got to be pretty committed to being. Something's got to be
Right.
pretty wrong with you. Yeah,
Right.
I agree with that.
So that's why I tell blacks, like, protesting is cool, but we need action. Like, you know, if your son graduating high school, he don't know what to do, put him in the military or get him in law enforcement. We need black cops too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that shit wouldn't be happening if their partners were biracial partners. You know what I'm saying? 2 minutes? We almost out? Okay. We don't got tape, but I guess we're going to run out of tape. Storage. All right, sir. It was a pleasure and an honor.
I really appreciate it.
We're going to do this again some more.
Looking forward to
Yes,
it.
sir.
There's so much more to talk about.
We haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
We talked about what we wanted to talk about with you earlier. We didn't get there, but it's cool. I love that.
All right, well, just send up a sign and I'll come out.
All right, cool.
And vice versa, we'll have you.
Yeah, I'd love to come out there to where you're at as well.
Okay.
Cool. All right, everybody. Make sure y'all. I don't have to tell y'all. All the information is down below. Click the links, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.